Philosophy, something that helps us ask important questions about life and death and how we should act and think. And it also provides an ethical framework for our lives. And I know I've already covered a philosophy iceberg before on my channel, but to be honest, it sucked. My mic was horrible, and same with my scripting and pronunciation. It was just overall bad video, so I just wanted to remake it and give it justice. So alright, this video will be long enough already, so let's just get into the Philosophy Iceberg Explained. And actually quickly, before we get into the video, consider subscribing to the channel. It's the channel's goal to be at 250,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I think we can do it, so please subscribe. Thanks. Tier 1. In this first tier will just be very basic ideas, and they will all kind of be a summary of what's to come, so this will just be very general ideas of philosophy, and they'll all correspond to everything later down in the iceberg, just so everything down lower and deeper into the iceberg makes more sense. So alright, kicking off the iceberg with metaphysics. Metaphysics, often considered the foundational branch of philosophy, delves into the fundamental nature of reality. It poses questions about existence, being, space, time, causality, and more, seeking to understand the nature of reality beyond the physical realm. At its core, metaphysics grapples with the question, what is real? It explores the nature of existence itself, examining the fundamental constitutes of reality and the relationship between them. One of the key debates in metaphysics is the question of substance. What are the basic building blocks of reality? Are they material, immaterial, or perhaps something altogether different? A central concept within metaphysics is that of ontology, which deals with the study of being and existence. Ontology seeks to identify and classify the different kinds of entities that exist, from physical objects to abstract concepts. It asks questions such as, what kinds of things exist? Are there universals that exist independently or particular instances? Or are there only particular things? Another important aspect of metaphysics is the study of time and space. Metaphysicians ponder the nature of time, whether it is linear or cyclical, an illusion or a fundamental aspect of reality. They also explore the nature of space, whether it is absolute or relative, continuous or discrete. Causality is another fundamental concept within metaphysics. It investigates the relationship between events and their causes, exploring questions such as, what causes things to happen? Is there a fundamental cause underlying all events, or are there multiple causes at work? Metaphysics also grapples with the nature of mind and consciousness. It explores questions about the relationship between the mind and the body, the nature of subjective experience, and the possibility of free will. Throughout history, metaphysics has been intertwined with religion, science, and philosophy. Ancient philosophers like Aristotle pondered the nature of being, while medieval thinkers like Thomas Aquinas sought to reconcile metaphysical questions with Christian theology. In the modern era, metaphysics has intersected with developments in science, especially in fields like quantum mechanics and cosmology, raising new questions about the nature of reality. So yeah, starting off with some pretty complicated stuff, but it will just kind of get more niche from here on, so it'll be easier to understand from here on, so just stick with me. Epistemology. Epistemology, the branch of philosophy concerned with the nature and scope of knowledge, is a fundamental inquiry into how we can come to know what we claim to know. At its core, epistemology seeks to answer questions about the nature of truth, belief, justification, and skepticism. One of the central questions in epistemology is, what is knowledge? This question is often framed in terms of the classic tripartite definition proposed by Plato, knowledge as justified true belief. According to this definition, for something to count as knowledge, it must be both true and justified. This raises further questions about the nature of truth. How do we determine what is true? In justification, what counts as sufficient evidence or reasoning to support a belief? Epistemologists also investigate the sources and limits of knowledge. They explore different ways of inquiring reasons and knowledge, such as perception, reason, testimony, and introspection, and assess their reliability and validity. They also examine the boundaries of human understanding, considering whether there are any inherent limits to what we can know. Skepticism is another important theme in epistemology. Skeptics question the possibility of knowledge altogether, raising doubts about our ability to justify our beliefs or to assess the truth with certainty. Philosophers throughout history, from ancient Greek skeptics to modern proponents of scientific skepticism, have grappled with the challenges posed by skepticism and sought to develop responses to this argument. Epistemology also intersects with other areas of philosophy, such as philosophy of mind and philosophy of science. Questions about the nature of perception, consciousness, and the scientific method are all relevant to epistemological inquiry. In addition to theoretical concerns, epistemology also has practical implications. It informs our understanding of education, inquiry, and the pursuit of truth in various domains of human activity. Understanding the nature of knowledge and how it is acquired can help us develop more effective methods of teaching and learning, as well as critical thinking skills that are essential for navigating the complexities of the modern world. Epistemology invites us to question our assumptions and to engage in a deeper exploration of how we can come to know the world around us. In this way, epistemology serves as a cornerstone of philosophical inquiry, illuminating the nature of knowledge and the ways we can strive to attain it. Theology. Theology, often referred to as the queen of the sciences in medieval academia, is the study of the nature of the divine and religious belief. It is a discipline that seeks to understand the nature of God, the universe, and humanity's relationship to both. At its core, theology explores questions about the existence and attributes of God. Theological inquiry delves into issues such as the nature of God's existence, God's omnipotence, and God's omniscience, and God's omnibenevolence, and the problem of evil in the context of the benevolent deity. Theology also involves the study of religious texts, traditions, and practices. The interpretation of sacred scriptures such as the Bible, the Quran, and the Vedas is a central concern of theological inquiry. Theological scholars analyze these texts in their historical, cultural, and linguistic contexts, seeking to understand their meaning and relevance for contemporary believers. Ethics is another very important aspect of theology. Theological ethics explores questions about moral values, ethical principles, and the application of religious teachings to moral dilemmas. It addresses issues such as justice, compassion, forgiveness, and the ethical implications of religious beliefs and practices. Theology is also closely intertwined with philosophy, the main idea of this video, particularly in areas such as metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Theological debates often draw on philosophical concepts and arguments, and theologians frequently engage with philosophical questions about the nature of reality, knowledge, and morality. Throughout history, theology has played a central role in shaping religious traditions and influencing culture, social, and political developments, and just society in general because, a lot of people have some sort of religion they look to. Theological ideas have also inspired art, literature, music, architecture, rituals, and contributes to the rich tapestry of the overall human culture and basically human condition. In contemporary society, theology continues to be a vibrant and diverse field of study. It encompasses a wide range of different perspectives, including traditional religious scholarship, comparative theology, feminist theology, liberation theology, and secular approaches to the study of religion. While theology is primarily concerned with the study of particular religious traditions, it also has the broader implications for human understanding in the search for meaning and purpose in life, and also where we come from and where we go when we die. Aesthetics. Aesthetics, often considered the philosophy of art and beauty, is the branch of philosophy that explores questions about the nature of beauty, art, and our aesthetic experiences. It delves into the fundamental principles underlying our perceptions and judgments of beauty, as well as the nature of artistic expression and creativity. At its core, aesthetics asks, what is beauty? A pretty hard question to actually answer. This seemingly simple question has been the subject of extensive philosophical question, with various theories proposed over the centuries, from Plato's notion of beauty as an objective ideal to Kant's idea of beauty as a subjective experience grounded in universal principles. Philosophers have offered diverse perspectives on the nature of beauty and its significance. Aesthetics also examines the nature of art and artistic expression. It explores questions about the definition of art, the criteria for distinguishing between art and non-art, and the role of the artist in creating and interpreting works of art. Philosophers have debated whether art should be judged primarily for its aesthetic qualities, its expressive power, or its social and political significance. So there's a lot of different hands playing into what makes something, beautiful. One of the central concerns of aesthetics is the relationship between beauty and truth. Some philosophers argue that art has the capacity to reveal profound truths about the human condition and the nature of reality, while others view beauty as a purely subjective experience disconnected from any objective reality. Aesthetics is not only concerned with the nature of beauty in art, but also with our aesthetic experiences, the ways in which we perceive, interpret, and respond to works of art in the natural world. It investigates the psychological, cognitive, and emotional aspects of aesthetic experience, seeking to understand how and why we find certain things beautiful or aesthetically pleasing. Throughout history, aesthetics have been intertwined with other areas of philosophy, such as metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology. It raises questions about the nature of perception, the relationship between art and morality, and the ways in which aesthetic judgments are influenced by cultural and historical contexts. In contemporary and modern society, aesthetics remains a pretty vibrant and interdisciplinary field of question. And, I think it's really bad now to try to figure this out because modern art, sorry, but looks horrible. Modern art is probably the worst art out there, so who knows why we find that beautiful, other than probably just rich people trying to get tax write-offs. Logic. Logic, often described as the study of reasoning and inference, is a fundamental branch of philosophy concerned with the principles of valid reasoning and argumentation. It explores the structure of arguments, the relationship between premises and conclusions, and the rules of correct reasoning. At this core, logic seeks to answer questions about what makes an argument valid or sound. A valid argument is one of which the conclusion logically follows from the premises. If the premises are true, then the conclusion must also be true. Soundness also goes a step further by requiring that the premises themselves are true, ensuring not only logical validity, but also factual accuracy. One of the central concepts in logic, at least in philosophy, is that of the deduction, which involves drawing specific conclusions from general principles or premises. Deductive reasoning is characterized by its certainty. If the premises is true and the argument is valid, then the conclusion must also be true. This form of reasoning is often represented using formal systems such as propositional logic. In addition to deduction, logic also encompasses other forms of different types of reasoning, such as induction and abduction. Inductive reasoning involves drawing general conclusions from specific observations or evidence, while abductive reasoning involves inferring the most likely explanation for a given set of observations. These different types of forms of reasoning are often used in scientific inquiry and everyday problem solving. Logic also examines the structure of arguments and the principles of interference. It investigates logical fallacies, such as errors in reasoning that undermine the validity of an argument, and provides tools for identifying and avoiding them. By understanding the principles of logical reasoning, individuals can become more adept at evaluating arguments, making sound judgments, and constructing persuasive arguments on their own. So if you study logic and reasoning, at least in the philosophical realm, you can become very smart and just be able to win a lot of conversations and arguments and just have the upper hand in most conversations. So this is a very important thing to learn just for everyday use. Throughout history, logic has become a central concern of philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists, and people who just speak and talk. Ancient philosophers such as Aristotle laid the foundations of logical inquiry with their work on syllogist reasoning, while medieval scholars like Thomas Aquinas, once again, developed sophisticated systems of formal logic. In the modern era, developments in symbolic logic and mathematical logic have expanded the scope of logical inquiry and its applications in fields such as computer science and artificial intelligence. So it's very, very important today, as just as it was important back then. So definitely a cool thing to study, at least nowadays, for more practical use. Political philosophy. One of my favorites just because it's very interesting on why people, abide by one political philosophy and one that doesn't, So let's just get into political philosophy. Political philosophy explores the fundamental questions about power, authority, justice, and governance within human societies. It delves into the nature of political institutions, of course, and rights and responsibilities of citizens and the principles that should guide the organization of society. At its core, political philosophy goes with the question, what is the best form of government? This question has become a central concern of political thinkers throughout history and basically everyone who is a part of politics, leading to a wide range of competing theories and ideologies. From the classical debates between democracy and tyranny in ancient Greece to the contemporary discussions about the role of the state in a globalized world, political philosophy continues to shape our understanding of political systems and their implications for human flourishing and what's the best way to rule a society. One of the key concepts in political philosophy is that of justice. Political philosophers seek to understand the principles of justice that should govern social and political life, as well as the mechanisms through which these principles can be realized. They explore questions about the distribution of resources, the protection of individual rights, and the balance of power within society. Political philosophy also examines the nature of authority and legitimacy. It asks questions such as, what gives governments the right to rule? Are there limits to the authority of the state? And how should political power be exercised and constrained? These questions are central to debates about the legitimacy of political institutions and the rights of citizens to resist unjust authority. Throughout history, political philosophy has been deeply intertwined with broader social and cultural movements, from the Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity to the Marxist critique of capitalism and the feminist call for gender equality. Political philosophers have played a crucial role in shaping political discourse and inspiring social change in basically how you live life today, whatever country you live in. In contemporary society, political philosophy continues to be a very vibrant and dynamic field of inquiry. It encompasses a wide range of different perspectives, from classical theories of liberalism, conservatism, and socialism to more recent developments in anarchism, communitarianism, and cosmopolitanism. Political philosophers engage with pressing issues such as globalization, environmental sustainability, human rights, and social justice, providing valuable insights into the complex challenges facing modern societies. Ultimately, political philosophies invites us to crucially examine the principles and practices that shape our political world by exploring questions about justice, authority, and the common good. Political philosophy encourages us to reflect on our own values, to imagine alternative ways to organize society, and to work towards a more just and equitable world. Ethics, often referred to as moral philosophy, is the branch of philosophy that deals with questions about right and wrong, good and bad, and the principles that guide human behavior. It seeks to understand the nature of morality, the basis for ethical judgments, and the principles that govern moral conduct. At its core, ethics is concerned with the question, how should we live? This question has been central to ethical inquiry since ancient times, and basically since people started, thinking about these things, prompting philosophers to develop various ethical theories and frameworks to guide human behavior and argue what's the best form of ethics and the best way to live life and the best version of right and wrong. From the virtue ethics of Aristotle to the deontological ethics of Immanuel Kant and the utilitarianism of Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, ethical theories offer different perspectives on what constitutes morally good action and the reasons for acting morally. One of the central concepts in ethics is that of moral reasoning. Ethical theories provide principles and criteria for evaluating moral decisions, helping individuals to determine what is right or wrong in particular situations. Moral reasoning involves considering the consequences of our actions, the intentions behind them, and the principles that should guide our conduct. Ethics also explores questions about the nature of moral values and obligations. It asks things such as, are moral values objective or subjective? Do moral obligations arise from divine command, such as God telling us to do something, or a social contract, or just human reason? All of these questions raise issues about the nature of morality and the foundations of ethical authority. Another important aspect of ethics is the study of applied ethics, which examines moral issues in specific contexts such as bioethics, environmental ethics, business ethics, and political ethics. Applied ethics involves applying ethical theories and principles to real-world dilemmas and making informed judgments about how to act ethically in complex situations. Throughout history, ethics has been closely intertwined with religion, philosophy, and law, so it's intertwined with some pretty important stuff. Religious traditions have also provided moral guidance and ethical principles for their followers, while philosophical inquiry and questions has raised challenges and expanded our understanding of morality. Legal systems also incorporate ethical principles into their frameworks, reflecting societal norms and values. In contemporary and modern society, ethics remains a vital aspect of human life and social interaction. It informs our personal relationships, professional conduct, and civic responsibilities, shaping our decisions and actions in a countless amount of ways. Ethical reflection and dialogue plays a very crucial role in addressing moral conflicts, resolving ethical dilemmas, and fostering a culture of respect, empathy, and justice. Ultimately, ethics invites us to reflect on our values, and your values, who's watching the video, I guess, to consider the consequences of our actions, and to strive to live in accordance with moral principles that promote human flourishing and well-being. Tier 2. Identity. Identity, in philosophical terms, encompasses the fundamental aspects of who we are as individuals and how we understand ourselves in relation to the world around us. It involves questions about the nature of personal identity, group identity, and the factors that shape our sense of self. At its core, personal identity is concerned with the question, what makes you the same person over time? This question has been the subject of philosophical question for centuries, with various different theories proposed to account for the continuity of personal identity despite the changes that individuals undergo throughout their lives. Identity also encompasses social and cultural dimensions, including group identity and collective identity. Group identity refers to ways in which individuals identify with and feel a sense of belonging to particular social groups, such as a family, nationality, ethnicity, religion, gender, or sexuality. Collective identity involves the shared values, beliefs, and experiences that bind members of a group together and shape their collective identity. Identity is not fixed or static, but is instead fluid and multifaceted, shaped by a complex interplay of biological, psychological, social, and cultural factors. It is influenced by our individual experiences, relationships, upbringing, cultural background, and societal context. Identity is also constructed through the processes of self-reflection, self-discovery, and self-expression, as individuals navigate their own sense of self, of who they are, and how they relate to others. Identity is not only a deeply personal matter, but also has important implications for social and political life. Issues of identity, including race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, and religion, often intersect with systems of power and privilege, shaping individuals' experiences of discrimination, marginalization, and oppression. Understanding and respecting diverse identities is essential for promoting social justice, equity, and inclusion in society, and that's just kind of the main point of the identity philosophy. Ontology. Ontology, often described as the study of being or existence, is a fundamental branch of metaphysics that explores the nature of reality in the fundamental categories of being. It seeks to understand what exists, how things exist, and the relationships between different types of beings, so very deep questions. At its core, ontology poses the question, what is real? This question prompts philosophers to examine the fundamental constitutes of reality and the principles that govern their existence. Ontology investigates the nature of entities, both concrete and abstract, and their modes of existence, including questions about identity, change, persistence, and causality. One of the central concepts in ontology is that of existence itself. Ontologists inquire into the nature of existence and the criteria for determining whether something exists. They explore questions such as Do abstract entities such as numbers or universals exist independently of the mind? Are there non-existent entities, such as fictional characters or mythical creatures, that have a kind of, quote, existence within certain contexts? Ontology also examines the structure of reality and the relationships between different kinds of beings. It categorizes entities into various ontological categories, such as substances, properties, relations, events, and states of affairs, and explores in ways in which these categories interact and interrelate. Ontologists seek to identify the most basic building blocks of reality and to understand how they combine and interact to form the complex phenomena we observe in the world. Throughout history, ontology has been a central concern of philosophical question, with different philosophers proposing various different ontological theories and systems. Ancient philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle laid the foundations for ontological inquiry with their theories of forms and substances, while modern philosophers such as René Descartes and Immanuel Kant developed new approaches to ontology in response to the scientific and philosophical developments of their time. In modern philosophy, ontology remains a pretty important and interdisciplinary field of study, with connections to other areas such as logic, philosophy of language, and metaphysics. Ontological questions also intersect with developments in science, particularly in fields such as physics, biology, and cognitive science. Ultimately, ontology invites us to contemplate the nature of existence itself and to reflect on the fundamental categories of being that underlie our experience of the world. By exploring questions about what exists, how things exist, and the relationship between different types of beings. Does life have meaning? But this question of whether life has meaning is one of the oldest and most profound questions in philosophy and basically history. It touches upon existential concerns about the purpose and significance of human existence, and it has been addressed by philosophers, theologians, and thinkers throughout history. One perspective is that life does indeed have meaning, but that meaning is subjective and constructed by individuals based on their values, beliefs, and experiences. According to this view, meaning is not inherent in the universe, but is rather something that we create for ourselves through our actions, our relationships, and our own individual pursuits. Each person may find meaning in different ways, through love, work, creativity, spirituality, or a sense of connection to others. And these sources of meaning can vary greatly from one individual to another. Another perspective is that life has no inherent meaning, or no purpose at all, and that any sense of meaning or purpose we perceive is a product of human psychology or cultural conditioning. According to this view, the universe is indifferent to human concerns, and there is zero cosmic significance to our existence. This perspective is often associated with existentialist philosophers such as Albert Camus, who argued that the absurdity of existence lies in the tension between our desire for meaning and the apparent meaninglessness of the universe. Some religious and spiritual traditions offer their own perspectives on the question of life's meaning. Many religious believers find meaning in their faith, seeing life as part of a larger cosmic plan or divine purpose. For example, in Christianity, the belief in a loving God who created the universe and has a plan for each individual's life can provide a sense of meaning and purpose. Similarly, in Eastern philosophies such as Buddhism, the pursuit of enlightenment and liberation from suffering can give a sense of purpose and direction. Ultimately, whether life has meaning is a deeply personal and subjective question that each individual must grapple with in their own way. While some may find meaning in religion, others may find it in relationships or work or creativity or personal growth. Still, others may confront the apparent meaninglessness of existence and seek to create their own meaning in the face of the absurdity of life. What is art? What is art? The question of what constitutes art has been a subject of debate and question for centuries, with philosophers, artists, and scholars offering a wide range of perspectives. While there is no single definition that captures the full complexity of art, several key themes and characteristics are often associated with artistic expression. One common perspective is that art involves the creation of objects images or experiences that are valued for their beauty, emotional expression, or intellectual stimulation. Artistic works are often characterized by their aesthetic qualities, such as their form, color, texture, and composition, which evoke some sort of subjective responses and appreciation in viewers. Another perspective is that art is a form of communication or expression through which artists convey their ideas, emotions, or experiences to others. Artistic expression can take many forms, including painting, sculpture, literature, music, dance, theater, film, and performance, each of which offers unique opportunities for creative expression and interpretation. Art also serves as a reflection of cultural values, beliefs, and identities, providing insights into the social, political, and historical context in which it is produced. So, art is once again something that is super subjective on just who you are, and whether you like it or not will really depend on who you are. It will just depend on, person to person. Through their work, artists may explore themes such as identity, power, justice, beauty, and the human condition, offering perspectives that challenge or critique prevailing norms and ideologies. Furthermore, art has the capacity to evoke empathy, provoke thought, and inspire action, serving as a catalyst for social change and transformation. Mariology. Mariology is a branch of philosophy that deals with the study of parts and wholes, focusing on the relationship between individual parts in the larger entities or structures they compose, so a unique kind of branch of philosophy. This sort of philosophy explores questions about the nature of composition, unity, and identity within complex objects and systems. At its core, Mariology investigates the principles and properties of part-whole relationships. It considers how individual parts combine to form larger wholes and how these wholes in turn relate to their constituent parts. Mariologists examine different types of part-whole relations, such as mereological sums, mereological parthood, and mereological composition, and seek to understand the principles that govern these relations. One of the central concepts in mereology is the mereological composition, which refers to the process by which individual parts combine to form a whole. Mereological explore questions about the conditions under which parts can be said to compose a whole, and the ways in which these compositions can vary depending on factors such as spatial proximity, temporal community, and causal interaction. So yeah, kind of a weird branch of philosophy, but I tried my best to explain it. I hope that made a little bit of sense. Not sure if it did, but just a bunch of small parts making up a big part of something big whole. If you understand this more than I do and can explain it better, comment it down below. I'll make sure to respond. Applied ethics. Applied ethics is a branch of ethics that deals with the practical application of moral principles to specific values, dilemmas, and controversies in various domains of human activity. Unlike normative ethics, which seeks to establish general principles and theories about what is morally right or wrong, applied ethics focuses on the concrete application of these principles to real-world situations. One of the key goals of applied ethics is to provide guidance and ethical analysis to individuals, organizations, and societies facing moral challenges in areas such as medicine, business, technology, law, politics, and the environment. Applied ethics draw on ethical theories and frameworks to evaluate moral dilemmas, make ethical judgments, and develop solutions that promote ethical behavior and decision-making. Some of the major areas of applied ethics include bioethics. Bioethics deals with ethical issues arising in the fields of medicine, healthcare, and the life sciences. It addresses questions such as abortion, euthanasia, genetic engineering, organ transplantation, end-of-life care, and medical research ethics. Bioethics strive to balance the principles of autonomy, beneficence, non-malevolence, and justice in medical practice and policy. Business ethics. Business ethics examines the moral responsibilities of corporations, executives and employees, and other stakeholders in the business world. It addresses issues such as corporate social responsibility, ethical decision-making in business, workplace ethics, environmental sustainability, and fair treatment of workers. Environmental ethics. Environmental ethics explores the moral dimensions of human interactions with the natural world. It considers questions such as environmental conservation, biodiversity, climate change, animal rights, and sustainable development. Environmental ethics advocate for ethical principles that promote ecological integrity, stewardship of the environment, and justice for present and future generations. Political ethics. Political ethics examines the moral principles that should govern the conduct of politicians, policymakers, and citizens in the political sphere. It addresses issues such as corruption, political integrity, accountability, justice, and the ethical dilemmas of governance. Political ethics seek to promote ethical behavior and decision-making in politics and public affairs. Technology ethics. Technology ethics explores the ethical implications of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, biotechnology, surveillance technology, and social media. It considers questions such as privacy, data ethics, algorithmic bias, digital rights, and the impact of technology on society. Technology ethics seek to ensure that technological innovations are developed and deployed in ways that are ethically responsible and socially beneficial. Applied ethics plays a crucial role in addressing the complex moral challenges of the modern world and guiding ethical decision-making in diverse contexts. Metaethics. Metaethics is a branch of philosophy concerned with the nature, status, and meaning of ethical statements, as well as the foundations of moral judgments. Unlike normative ethics, which focuses on what actions are right and wrong, and applied ethics, which deals with specific moral dilemmas, which we both covered just a few minutes ago, metaethics aims to understand the underlying assumptions and concepts that inform ethical discourse. One of the central questions in metaethics is whether moral statements express objective truths or are merely expressions of personal or cultural attributes. This debate is often framed in terms of moral realism versus moral anti-realism. Moral realists argue that moral facts exist independently of human beliefs and attitudes, much like facts about the natural world. They believe that statements such as murder is wrong can be true or false regardless of individual opinions. On the other hand, moral anti-realists deny the existence of objective moral truths and contend that moral judgments are subjective or relative to particular contexts or cultures. Within the realm of moral realism, there are various theories that attempt to explain the nature of moral facts. One prominent theory is ethical naturalism, which posits that moral properties are ultimately reducible to natural properties. According to this view, statements about morality can be understood in terms of empirical facts about human well-being, social cooperation, or natural selection. Another influential approach is ethical non-naturalism, which maintains that moral properties are irreducible and non-identical to any natural properties. Proponents of ethical non-naturalism argue that moral facts are sui generis and cannot be fully captured by empirical investigation. Instead, they may appeal to intuition or reason to support moral judgments. Additionally, metaethics explore the semantics of moral language and the possibility of moral knowledge. Some philosophers investigate the meaning of moral terms and whether they refer to real properties in the world. Others examine how we come to know moral truths and whether moral knowledge is attainable through rational reflection, empirical observation, or some other means. Furthermore, metaethics intersects with other areas of philosophy, such as epistemology, metaphysics, and philosophy of language. Questions about the objectivity of moral values raise broader questions and issues about the nature of truth, the relationship between language and reality, and the foundations of human knowledge. In summary, and just overall, metaethics engages with fundamental questions about the nature and status of morality. Normative ethics. Normative ethics is a branch of philosophy concerned with determining the moral standards that govern human conduct. Unlike metaethics, which explores the nature and status of ethical statements, normative ethics focuses on prescribing how individuals ought to behave and what actions are morally right or wrong. It provides frameworks and theories for evaluating ethical dilemmas and guiding moral decision-making. One of the key questions in normative ethics is how to establish criteria for determining the morality of actions. Different ethical theories offer distinct perspectives on this issue, each emphasizing various different principles or values as foundational for moral judgments. Utilitarianism is one prominent normative ethical theory that proposes maximizing overall happiness or well-being as the ultimate moral principle. According to utilitarianism, an action is morally right if it produces the greatest amount of happiness or utility for the greatest number of people. This approach prioritizes the consequences of actions and seeks to maximize overall welfare. Deontological ethics, on the other hand, emphasizes the importance of moral rules or principles that dictate certain duties or obligations regardless of their consequences. Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative is a central deontological principle that instructs individuals to act according to universal maxims and treat others as an end in themselves, rather than merely as means to an end. Deontological ethics prioritizes the intentions behind actions and the inherent moral worth of certain duties. Virtue ethics offers a different perspective by focusing on the character of the moral agent rather than specific actions or rules. Rooted in ancient Greek philosophy, virtue ethics emphasizes the development of virtuous character traits such as courage, honesty, and compassion. According to virtue ethics, moral decisions arise from cultivating virtuous dispositions and exercising practical wisdom in navigating ethical dilemmas. Other normative ethical theories include ethical egoism, which advocates maximizing one's self-interest, and contractualism, which proposes moral principles based on hypothetical agreements among rational agents. Normative ethics also addresses practical questions about applying ethical theories to real-world situations and resolving moral conflicts. Overall, normative ethics provides frameworks for evaluating moral decisions and guiding ethical conduct. So this entry just really went over most or almost all of the different types of ethics. So yeah, now on to the next tier. Alright, now on to tier 3, and geez, we've only done 2 tiers so far, and we're already 45 minutes into the video. So yeah, this will definitely be a long video, like I said. Definitely the ultimate philosophy iceberg. But alright, getting into tier 3, starting off with act/rule utilitarianism. Act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism are two distinct approaches within the broader framework of utilitarian ethics, which aims to maximize overall happiness or utility as the basis for moral decision-making. While both share the fundamental principle of promoting the greatest happiness for the greater number, they differ in how they apply this principle to moral judgments. Act utilitarianism evaluates the morality of individual actions based on their consequences in specific circumstances. According to act utilitarianism, an action is morally right if it produces greater overall happiness than any alternative action available in that particular situation. In other words, act utilitarians focus on the immediate consequences of each individual action and choose the option that maximizes utility in that specific context. For example, suppose a surgeon has the choice to either save 1 patient in critical condition or save 5 patients with less severe injuries by using the organs of the first patient. An act utilitarian would assess the consequences of each action in this particular scenario and choose the option that maximizes overall happiness, even if it means sacrificing the life of 1 individual to save 5 others. In contrast, rule utilitarianism evaluates actions based on general rules or principles that, if universally followed, would maximize overall happiness in the long run. Rule utilitarians argue that adhering to certain moral rules or guidelines tends to produce greater overall happiness than assessing each action individually in every different situation. These rules are derived from utilitarian calculations of the expected consequences of following them consistently over time. Continuing with the previous example, a rule utilitarian might advocate for a rule such as do not kill innocent individuals, because following this rule generally leads to greater overall happiness, even if there are occasional exceptions where violating the rule might produce greater utility in specific circumstances. Rule utilitarians prioritize the consistency and predictability of moral rules as the means of promoting social harmony and well-being for everyone involved in that situation. One criticism of act utilitarianism is that it could lead to morally questionable decisions in certain situations, such as sacrificing the rights or welfare of minority groups to achieve the greatest overall happiness for other groups. Rule utilitarianism seeks to address this criticism by prioritizing the adherence to general rules that promote the common good and minimize harm to individuals. Overall, while act utilitarianism focuses on maximizing utility in each individual case, rule utilitarianism emphasizes the importance of following general rules or principles that, if consistently applied, lead to the greatest overall happiness for everyone. Thesiss Ship. The paradox of Thesiss Ship, also known as the Ship of Theseus, is a thought experiment that raises questions about identity, persistence, and the nature of objects undergoing change over time. This paradox is framed around the legendary ship of Theseus, which is said to have been preserved by Athenians for centuries as a cultural relic. Over time, as the ship's wooden parts decayed, they were replaced one by one with new identical parts. Eventually, every original part of the ship was replaced with a new part. This paradox arises when one considers whether the ship, in its fully repaired state, remains the same ship as the original one sailed by Theseus. On one hand, it seems clear that the ship should retain its identity despite the replacement of its parts. After all, it still bears the name and history of Theseus' ship, and it serves the same function as the seafaring vessel. However, upon closer examination, doubts emerge. If every original part of the ship has been replaced, is it still accurate to call it Theseus' ship? Does its identity depend on the physical continuity of its parts, or is it defined by some other criteria, such as its historical significance or cultural context? Furthermore, if one were to collect all the original parts that were replaced and assemble them into a new ship, which ship would be the true ship of Theseus? Would both ships share equal claim to the title, or does identity depend on something beyond mere physical composition? The paradox raises profound philosophical questions about the nature of identity and persistence. It challenges our intuitive understanding of objects and suggests that identity may be more complex than simple continuity of physical matter. Should a leader be moral? The question of whether a leader should be moral is a surprisingly profound and complex one, encompassing ethical, practical, and philosophical considerations. At its core lies the fundamental tension between the moral imperative for leaders to embody integrity, honesty, and compassion, and the practical realities of leadership, which often entail navigating competing interests and complex dilemmas. From an ethical standpoint, there is a compelling argument that leaders should be moral. Moral leadership not only fosters trust, respect, and loyalty among followers, but also contributes to the overall well-being and flourishing of a society. Leaders who do demonstrate integrity and ethical conduct set a positive example for others to follow, creating a culture of accountability and responsibility within organizations and communities. Moreover, leaders have a social contract with their constituents, wherein they are entrusted with power and authority in exchange for serving the common good and upholding moral principles. Violating this trust by acting immorally can erode legitimacy and undermine social cohesion, potentially leading to a breakdown of trust and cooperation and just the followers listening to the leader. However, the relationship between leadership and morality is not always as straightforward as it seems. Leaders often face moral dilemmas where competing values or interests are at stake, requiring careful judgment and ethical reasoning. Furthermore, moral standards can vary across cultures and contexts, and what constitutes moral behavior may be subject to interpretation. Additionally, leaders may encounter situations where pursuing moral objectives conflicts with other important goals, such as economic efficiency, political stability, or national security. In some cases, leaders may need to navigate complex trade-offs and make difficult decisions that balance moral considerations with pragmatic concerns. Furthermore, leaders, like all individuals, are fallible and susceptible to moral failings, so no one's perfect. Even well-intentioned leaders may make mistakes or succumb to ethical lapses under pressure or temptation. Cultivating self-awareness, humility, and accountability is just the essentials for leaders to mitigate the risk of moral wrongdoing and maintain trust and credibility. In conclusion, while there are strong reasons why leaders should aspire to be moral, the relationship between leadership and morality is nuanced and context dependent, and it's not as straightforward as just, yeah, they should be good, because most of the time, it's really hard to just be a good person when you're a leader. Fatalism. Fatalism is a philosophical doctrine that asserts that all events, including human actions and choices, are predetermined and inevitable. According to fatalism, the course of history and the future trajectory of individuals' lives are already fixed and cannot be altered, regardless of human efforts or intentions. One of the central tenets of fatalism is the concept of determinism, which posits that every event, including human decisions and actions, is actually determined by a preceding factor. In other words, fatalism holds that the entire sequence of events in the universe is governed by an unalterable chain of cause and effect, such that the future is already determined by the past, so you can't do anything to actually change your future. Fatalism can take various different forms and be influenced by different philosophical, religious, or cultural traditions. In some interpretations, fatalism is associated with a sense of resignation or acceptance of fate, where individuals passively submit to the inevitability of events without attempting to change or influence them. This perspective may lead to a sense of powerlessness or apathy, as individuals who believe in this fatalism philosophy believe that their actions have no real impact on the course of events. However, fatalism can also be understood as a more existential or philosophical concept that challenges conventional notions of free will and agency. From this perspective, fatalism raises questions about the nature of choice, responsibility, and human autonomy. If everything is predetermined, do individuals truly have the freedom to make meaningful choices, or are their actions merely illusions of autonomy? Critics of fatalism often argue that it undermines notions of moral responsibility and accountability, as it suggests that individuals cannot be held responsible for their actions if those actions were predestined and beyond their control. Furthermore, fatalism may lead to a sense of nihilism or fatalistic resignation, which we'll get into later down the iceberg, where individuals feel powerless to shape their own destinies or affect meaningful change in the world. Despite its philosophical implications, fatalism is not universally accepted. In alternative perspectives such as compatibilism, which is the belief that determinism and free will are compatible, offer different ways of reconciling the apparent tension between determinism and human agency. In summary, fatalism is a philosophical doctrine that contends that all events, including human actions, are predetermined and inevitable. Pascal's Wager, and definitely one of my favorites on the entire iceberg. Pascal's Wager is just so thought-provoking. But anyways, let's get into it. Pascal's Wager presents a fascinating argument regarding belief in the existence of God, proposed by the French philosopher and mathematician Blaise Pascal in the 17th century. This wager has stirred considerable debate and reflection ever since. At its core, Pascal's Wager suggests that rationality dictates believing in God. Regardless of whether God's existence can be proven empirically, the wager begins by acknowledging that humans cannot definitively prove the existence of God through reason alone. Pascal recognized the limitations of human intellect in grasping the infinite and the transcendent. However, he argued that when faced with the choice of believing or not in God, there are essentially four possible outcomes, forming a matrix of belief and action. 1. If you believe in God and God exists, you will gain eternal bliss. 2. If you believe in God and God does not exist, you lose relatively little from the temporal pleasures and pursuits of life. 3. If you do not believe in God and God exists, you face eternal damnation. 4. If you do not believe in God and God does not exist, you gain relatively little and lose relatively little by the temporal pleasures and pursuits of life. In this framework, Pascal posits that the belief in God is the rational choice because it offers the greatest potential reward, which is eternal bliss, and the least potential loss, just from earthly pleasures, compared to the other options. Even if the probability of God's existence is uncertain, the potential consequences of disbelief would be eternal damnation, which totally outweighs the risks of belief. Critics of Pascal's Wager often raise objections regarding its oversimplification of belief. its assumption of a binary choice between belief and disbelief, and its reduction of religious faith to a pragmatic calculation. They argue that a genuine religious conviction cannot be reduced to a mere cost-benefit analysis, and that faith involves more than a rational assessment of potential outcomes. Moreover, some critics contend that Pascal's Wager fails to address the diversity of religious beliefs and the possibility of multiple gods or alternate conceptions of the divine. The wager assumes a specific understanding of God, which is primarily within the Christian tradition, which may not resonate with individuals from other religious or philosophical backgrounds. So this is just mainly a Christian, tradition, because it only talks about heaven and hell, which is mainly Christian. And I think this is just kind of a way to get people to believe in Christianity. I'm not going after anyone's religions, but definitely an interesting thing. Pascal's Wager, very interesting to me. Despite these criticisms, Pascal's Wager remains influential in philosophical discussions about the rationality of religious belief and the nature of faith. It challenges individuals to confront the implications of their beliefs or lack thereof, and encourages thoughtful reflection on the pursuit of ultimate meaning and purpose in life. Whether one ultimately finds Pascal's argument compelling or not, it undeniably provokes contemplation on some of the most profound questions of human existence. Nurture versus nature. The debate between nature and nurture has been essential to the field of psychology and philosophy for centuries, addressing the question of whether human behavior and traits are primarily shaped by innate biological factors, which is nature, or by environmental influences and experiences, which is nurture. On the side of nature, proponents argue that genetics and biological predispositions play a dominant role in determining various aspects of human development, including personality traits, intelligence, temperament, and even certain psychological disorders, so nature definitely plays a big part, and that's proven by, science. This perspective is supported by empirical evidence from studies of identical twins raised in different environments, which often reveal remarkable similarities in behavior and characteristics despite differences in upbringing. Conversely, the nurture perspective emphasizes the significance of environmental factors such as a family upbringing, social interactions, cultural influences, and educational experiences in shaping individuals' behavior and psychological development. This view suggests that humans are born as a blank slate, and that their personalities and behaviors are largely molded by their interactions with the external world. However, contemporary understandings of human development recognize that nature and nurture are not mutually exclusive, but rather interact in complex ways to shape individuals' lives, so it's not really as simple as just choosing one or the other. This interaction is often described as a gene-environment interplay, where genetic predispositions can influence how individuals respond to their environments, and environmental factors can, in turn, activate or suppress certain genetic tendencies. Moreover, environmental influences can lead to changes in gene expression without altering the underlying DNA sequence, further blurring the boundaries between the actual nature and the nurture. In practical terms, the nature-nurture debate has had profound implications for various aspects of society, including education, healthcare, criminal justice, and public policy. Understanding the relative contributions of genetic and environmental factors to human behavior can inform interventions aimed at prompting positive development, preventing psychological disorders, and addressing social inequalities. Ultimately, while the debate between nature and nurture persists as a theoretical and philosophical discourse, contemporary and modern perspectives emphasize the importance of recognizing the dynamic interaction between genetic and environmental influences in shaping human behavior and psychological functioning. So it's really not as easy as just choosing nature or nurture, but it's a pretty intertwined thing between both of them that both play a big part. Antinatalism. Antinatalism is a philosophical position that argues against procreation, asserting that it is morally wrong or undesirable to bring new sentient beings into existence. So it's basically just saying it's bad to have babies. The term antinatalism is derived from the Latin words anti meaning against and natalis meaning birth. While antinatalism encompasses various different perspectives and arguments, its central premise is rooted in concerns about the inherent suffering and harms of existence. One of the fundamental arguments put forth by antinatalists is the asymmetry argument, which posits that the absence of suffering is good, while the absence of pleasure is not bad unless there is someone who desires that pleasure. Therefore, bringing a new sentient being into existence, such as a baby, risks subjecting them to potential suffering and harm without guaranteeing any corresponding benefit or increase in well-being. From this perspective, antinatalists advocate for refraining from procreation as a way to prevent the imposition of suffering on potential future individuals. Antinatalism is often motivated by considerations of ethics, compassion, and the alleviation of suffering. Some antinatalists argue that the world is characterized by pervasive suffering, including physical pain, emotional distress, and existential angst. And the procreation perpetuates this cycle of suffering by creating new beings who are vulnerable to harm and adversity. Additionally, concerns about overpopulation, resource depletion, and environmental degradation further contribute to the antinatalist arguments about bringing new humans into existence. Critics of antinatalism challenge its premises and conclusions on various different grounds. Some argue that life is not inherently negative and that it can be meaningful, fulfilling, and enjoyable for many individuals despite its challenges and hardships. They contend and argue that antinatalism overlooks the potential for growth, joy, and human flourishing, as well as the capacity for individuals to overcome adversity and find purpose and satisfaction in their lives. Moreover, critics raise practical concerns about the feasibility and implications of adopting antinatalist principles on a societal level, including issues related to population decline, demographic shifts, and the sustainability of social and economic systems. Essentialism. Essentialism is a philosophical concept that asserts that existence of inherent, unchanging qualities or characteristics that define the essence of a particular entity or category. It suggests that objects, individuals, or concepts possess fixed and immutable properties that determine their identity and function. Essentialism has been influenced in various domains, including philosophy, psychology, sociology, and education. In philosophical terms, essentialism dates back to the ancient Greek thought, particularly the works of Plato, who proposed the theory of forms. According to Plato, the physical world is but a shadow or imperfect reflection of the realm of ideal forms, which represent the essential, immutable properties of objects and concepts. For example, the form of a perfect circle exists independently of any particular instance of a circle found in the physical world. In psychology, essentialism manifests itself in the concept of essential traits or characteristics that define individual personality or identity. Psychologists such as Carl Jung and his theory of archetypes, and later theorists like Hans Eyck with his personality dimensions, have explored the idea of fundamental, enduring qualities that underlie human behavior and psychological functioning. So yeah, this one is really confusing to me, but if any of you guys down below understand essentialism a little bit more, then let me know. I bet it basically just things that exist in their perfect form that aren't seen. I don't know. Very confusing to me. Qualia. Qualia are perhaps one of the most intriguing and elusive concepts in philosophy of the mind. They refer to the subjective, qualitative aspects of conscious experience. The what is it like to perceive, feel, or experience something. Qualia encompass the raw, immediate, and qualitative aspects of sensory experiences, such as emotions and mental states, such as the taste of chocolate, the feeling of warmth from sunlight, or the sensation of pain. The term qualia is derived from the Latin word for quality, emphasizing the qualitative nature of these subjective experiences. Philosophers often use thought experiments such as Frank Jackson's famous Mary's Room scenario or Thomas Nagel's What Is It Like to Be a Bat to illustrate the distinction between the objective, physical description of phenomena and the subjective, first-person experience of those phenomena. Qualia pose significant challenges to materialist or physicist theories of mind, which seek to explain consciousness solely in terms of physical processes and brain states. While physicalist approaches can account for the neutral correlates of conscious experiences, they struggle to explain why certain brain processes give rise to specific qualitative experiences. The hard problem of consciousness, as articulated by philosopher David Chalmers. Moreover, qualia raise questions about the nature of perception, representation, and the relationship between mind and body. How do subjective experiences arise from objective physical processes? Can qualia be reduced to or explained in terms of neurobiological mechanisms, or do they represent irreducible features of consciousness? While philosophers continue to debate the nature and significance of qualia, researchers in cognitive science and neuroscience seek to understand the neural mechanisms underlying conscious experiences and how they relate to subjective qualia. Despite the challenges and complexities associated with qualia, it remains central to our understanding of consciousness and subjective experiences. Rationalism is a philosophical position that emphasizes the role of reason and rationality as primary sources of knowledge and justification. It stands in contrast to empiricism, which asserts that knowledge is primarily derived from sensory experience. Rationalists argue that certain truths and principles can be known independently of sensory observation or empirical evidence, relying instead on innate ideas, logical deduction, and a priori reasoning. So this one's definitely interesting because it's saying that there's some things that are just kind of known. The roots of rationalism can be traced back to ancient Greek philosophy, particularly the works of philosophers like Plato. Plato posited that the existence of transcendent forms or ideas which represent the ultimate reality and serve as the basis for true knowledge. According to Plato, knowledge of these forms is attainable through the exercise of reason and dialectical inquiry, rather than through empirical observation. In the early modern period, rationalism experienced a resurgence with philosophers like René Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Descartes famously articulated his method of doubt, seeking to establish a foundation of indubitable knowledge upon which to build a system of philosophy. He concluded that while sensory perceptions may be deceptive, the existence of a thinking self and the existence of God can be known with certainty through introspection and reason. Spinoza, influenced by Descartes, developed a rationalist metaphysical system grounded in the concept of substance monism, positing that there is only one substance in the universe, God or nature, which manifests in an infinite variety of attributes and modes. Leibniz, on the other hand, contributed to the rationalist epistemology with his theory of innate ideas and the principle of sufficient reasoning, which asserts that everything that happens or exists must have a sufficient reason for its existence. Rationalism continued to evolve in the modern era, with philosophers such as Immanuel Kant synthesizing rationalist and empiricist insights in his transcendentalism idealism. Kant argued that while sensory experience provides the raw material for knowledge, it is structured and interpreted by innate cognitive faculties such as space and time and the categories of understanding, which are a priori conditions of human cognition. In contemporary philosophy, rationalism remains a prominent approach within epistemology, metaphysics, ethics, and other branches of philosophy. While the dominance of empiricism in the nature science has led to increased emphasis on empirical methods and evidence, rationalist perspectives continue to inform debates about the nature of reality, the foundations of knowledge, and the limits of human reason. Empiricism. Empiricism is a philosophical perspective that emphasizes the role of sensory experience and observation as the primary sources of knowledge and justification. So this one is just the opposite of what we just went over, which was rationalism. According to empiricists, knowledge is derived from sensory perception, experimentation, and empirical evidence, rather than innate ideas or priori reasoning. The roots of empiricism can be traced back to ancient Greek philosophy, particularly the autonomists such as Democritus and Epicurus, who proposed that knowledge arises from the interaction of atoms and sensory perception, so everything's just physical. However, empiricism became more prominent during the early modern period with the rise of thinkers like Francis Bacon, John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. Francis Bacon, often considered the father of empiricism, advocated for a systematic approach to scientific inquiry based on empirical observation and experimentation. He emphasized the importance of collecting data through observation of nature and subjecting it to rigorous testing to derive general principles and laws. John Locke, in his essay concerning human understanding, rejected the notion of innate ideas proposed by rationalists like René Descartes and argued that the mind at birth is a tabula rasa, or a blank slate upon which sensory experience writes. According to Locke, all knowledge ultimately derives from sensory impressions and reflection on those impressions. George Berkeley, known for his philosophy of Vitalism, extended empiricist principles to argue that the only things that exist are minds and their perceptions. He famously asserted that to be is to be perceived, suggesting that reality consists of ideas perceived by minds, with no existence independent of perception. David Hume, one of the most influential empiricists, critically examined the foundations of human knowledge in his work, A Treatise of Human Nature. Hume famously challenged the notion of causality, arguing that we can never directly perceive causal connections between events, but only observe regularities in their occurrence. He also questioned the concept of self, suggesting that our sense of personal identity is constructed from a bundle of perceptions rather than a substantial, enduring self. In contemporary and more modern philosophy, empiricism remains a pretty central perspective within epistemology, the philosophy of science, and other areas. Empiricist principles continue to inform scientific methodology, emphasizing the importance of empirical observation, experimentation, and evidence-based reasoning in the pursuit of knowledge about the nature world and human experience. Altruism. Altruism is a concept deeply rooted in philosophy, psychology, and ethics, referring to the selfless concern for the well-being of others. It involves acts of kindness, compassion, and generosity directed towards others without expecting anything in return. Altruistic behavior often involves sacrificing one's own interests or resources to benefit another, with no immediate personal gain for the person doing the kind act. The term altruism was coined by the French philosopher Auguste Comte in the 19th century, deriving from the Latin word alter meaning other. Comte used the term to describe the moral obligation to live for the sake of others and to contribute to the welfare of society as a whole. In philosophy, altruism raises fundamental questions about the nature of ethics and morality, including whether altruistic actions are motivated by genuine concern for others or by self-interest, whether altruism is inherently valuable, and whether individuals have a moral obligation to act altruistically. Psychologists have conducted extensive research on altruism, exploring its underlying motivations, psychological mechanisms, and developmental origins. Some theories of altruism propose that altruistic behavior may be motivated by empathy, compassion, or a sense of moral duty, while others suggest that altruism may be driven by social norms, evolutionary pressures, or psychological rewards such as personal satisfaction or social approval. Evolutionary psychologists have proposed theories such as kin selection and reciprocal altruism to explain the emergence and persistence of altruistic behavior in humans and other social animals. Kin selection theory suggests that altruistic behaviors directed towards genetically related individuals may increase the likelihood of passing on one's genes, while reciprocal altruism posits that individuals may benefit from cooperation and mutual assistance in social groups. So it may just be a very primal thing in humans that is kind of coded into our DNA. Philosophical and ethical debates about altruism often intersect with discussions about egoism, self-interest, and the balance between individual and collective well-being. Critics of altruism argue that genuine selflessness is rare or even impossible, as individuals may derive psychological benefits or social rewards from altruistic acts. Others contend that altruism is a moral ideal worth aspiring to, regardless of its underlying motivations or psychological mechanisms. Despite both of these debates, altruism continues to be valued as a moral virtue and a guiding principle in many ethical and religious traditions. Hedonism, which is kind of just the opposite of altruism, but anyways, hedonism is a philosophical doctrine that posits pleasure as the ultimate goal of human life and the primary source of value and motivation. The term hedonism is derived from the ancient Greek word hedon, meaning pleasure. Hedonists argue that the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain are the driving forces between human behavior and decision-making. The roots of hedonism can be traced back to ancient Greek philosophy, with prominent proponents such as Epicurus and the Cyrenaics. Epicurean hedonism, as articulated by Epicurus, emphasizing the attainment of pleasure and the avoidance of pain through the cultivation of tranquility and the fulfillment of basic desires, while minimizing unnecessary desires and anxieties. Cyneretic hedonism, associated with philosophers like Cyrene, prioritizes immediate sensual pleasures and gratification of desires, advocating for the pursuit of pleasure in the present moment without concern for long-term consequences. In modern philosophy, hedonism has been further developed and refined by thinkers such as Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, who formulated utilitarianism as a consequentialist ethical theory grounded in the principle of maximizing happiness or pleasure and minimizing suffering or pain for the greatest number of people. Contemporary hedonism encompasses a range of philosophical positions and ethical theories, including psychological hedonism, ethical hedonism, and hedonistic utilitarianism. Psychological hedonism asserts that all human actions are ultimately motivated by the desire for pleasure or the avoidance of pain, while ethical hedonism prescribes seeking pleasure and avoiding pain as the guiding principles of morality. Critics of hedonism raise various objections, including concerns about the quality and duration of pleasure, the potential conflict between different sources of pleasure, and the neglect of other values such as virtue, meaning, and social justice. Additionally, some critics argue that a relentless pursuit of pleasure may lead to unexpected negative consequences, such as addiction, hedonic adaptation, or the neglect of long-term goals and overall well-being. Proponents of hedonism counter these criticisms by usually emphasizing the importance of informed and responsible pursuit of pleasure, as well as the potential for pleasure to encompass a wide range of experiences, from sensory pleasures to intellectual, aesthetic, and relational fulfillment. Despite its critics, hedonism continues to be a significant and influential perspective within philosophy and psychology, prompting pretty big debates about the nature of happiness, the pursuit of well-being, and the ethical foundations of human behavior. Objectivism is a philosophical system developed by the Russian-American philosopher Ayn Rand. It encompasses a comprehensive worldview that includes metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics. At its core, objectivism advocates for the primacy of reason, individualism, and the pursuit of self-interest as moral virtues. In metaphysics, objectivism asserts the existence of an objective reality independent of human consciousness. According to objectivism, reality exists as an absolute, and knowledge of reality is attainable through reason and sensory perception. Objectivism rejects the idea of subjective reality or relativism, affirming the existence of an objective, knowable world governed by immutable natural laws. In epistemology, objectivism upholds reason as the primary means of acquiring knowledge and understanding the world. Reason, according to objectivism, is the faculty that enables humans to grasp reality, form concepts, and engage in logical thought. Objectivism rejects faith, mysticism, and revelation as valid sources of knowledge, emphasizing the importance of rational inquiry and critical thinking. In ethics, objectivism advocates for morality of self-interest, grounded in the principles of rational egoism. Objectivism holds that individuals have fundamental right to pursue their own self-interest, provided they do not infringe upon the rights of others. Objectivist ethics prioritize individual happiness, achievement, and fulfillment, viewing rational self-interest as the proper guide for human action. In politics, objectivism advocates for a laissez-faire capitalism and limited government. Objectivism holds that individuals have the right to live their lives free from coercion or interference, and that the role of government should be strictly limited to protecting individual rights, including property rights and the rule of law. Objectivist politics reject collectivism, socialism, and any form of government intervention in the economy or personal affairs. In aesthetics, objectivism champions the concept of romantic realism, celebrating art that portrays heroic individuals and idealized representations of life. Objectivist aesthetics value art that affirms the potential and nobility of human beings, rejecting nihilism, cynicism, and avant-garde experimentation for its own sake. Objectivism has been both praised and criticized for its uncompromising defense of reason, individualism, and capitalism. Critics argue that objectivism oversimplifies complex social and ethical issues, neglects the role of empathy and compassion in human relationships, and promotes a narrow, elitist view of human nature and morality. Despite its controversies and debates and critics, objectivism continues to influence debates in philosophy, politics, and culture, inspiring individuals to embrace reason, independence, and the pursuit of their own happiness. Alright, now on to Tier 4, Solipsism. Solipsism is a philosophical position that asserts the self as the only reality and that nothing outside of one's mind can be truly known to exist. In other words, solipsism holds that the only thing one can be certain of is the existence of one's own mind or consciousness, and that everything else, which is other minds, the external world, and the physical universe, may be products of one's own imagination or mental constructs. The term solipsism is derived from the Latin words solus, meaning alone, and ips, meaning self. Solipsism suggests a radical form of skepticism, questioning the validity of knowledge, claims beyond one's own subjective experience. Solipsism has roots in ancient philosophy, with parallels found in the skeptical traditions of ancient Greece and India. However, solipsism gained prominence as a distinct philosophical position during the early modern period, particularly with the works of philosophers like René Descartes and George Berkeley. Descartes famously articulated his method of doubt in his Meditations on First Philosophy, seeking to doubt or suspend belief in any proposition that could be doubted. Descartes arrived at the conclusion cogito ergo sum, which is I think, therefore I am, which asserts that the very act of doubting or thinking presupposes the existence of a thing itself. While Descartes did not explicitly endorse solipsism, his methodological doubt laid the groundwork for solipsist skepticism about the external world. Berkeley, in his philosophy of subjective idealism, argued that material objects and the external world exist only as ideas or perceptions in the mind of an observing subject. According to Berkeley, to be is to be perceived, suggesting that reality consists of minds and their perceptions with no existence independent of perception. Critics of solipsism raise various different objections about why that's not true, I guess, which includes its seemingly paradoxical nature, its inability to account for the shared experiences and interactions among individuals, and its implications for various communications, ethics, and social relationships. Solipsism poses significant challenges due to the possibility of knowledge, truth, and meaningful discourse if taken to its extreme conclusion. While solipsism remains a provocative and controversial philosophical position, most individuals find it difficult to maintain in practice, as it contradicts common sense and everyday experience. Nevertheless, solipsism is a really interesting philosophical question, and it asks, are you the only true mind to exist? Consequentialism. Consequentialism is a moral and ethical theory that evaluates the morality of actions based on their consequences or outcomes. According to consequentialism, the rightness or wrongness of an action is determined solely by the goodness or badness of its consequences. In other words, the ends justify the means. The central idea of consequentialism is often summarized by the principle of utility, which holds that the moral worth of an action is determined by its utility or the amount of happiness, pleasure, well-being, or other positive outcomes it produces. Consequentialist theories differ in their definitions of utility and in how they weigh different kinds of consequences. One of the most well-known forms of consequentialism is utilitarianism, which was developed by philosophers such as Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Utilitarianism asserts that the morally right action is that one that produces the greatest overall happiness or utility for the greatest number of people. Utilitarianism emphasizes the importance of impartiality and the consideration of the interests of all individuals affected by an action, without giving priority to one's own interests or those of particular groups. Consequentialist theories can vary in their scope and application. Some focus on maximizing happiness or pleasure, while others prioritize other values such as well-being, flourishing, or the satisfaction of preferences. Consequentialist principles can be applied to individual actions, public policies, or moral rules, depending on the specific context and circumstances. Critics of consequentialism raise various objections, including concerns about its potential to justify morally reprehensible actions if they lead to good outcomes, its neglect of individual rights and justice, and its reliance on predictions or estimations of future consequences which may be uncertain or unknowable. Deontology. Deontology is a moral and ethical theory that emphasizes the importance of moral rules, duties, and principles in determining the rightness or wrongness of actions. Although, unlike consequentialism, which evaluates the morality of actions based on their outcomes, deontology focuses on the inherent nature of actions themselves and the moral rules or principles that govern them. Deontological theories assert that certain actions are intrinsically right or wrong regardless of their consequences. These theories typically emphasize the importance of following moral rules or principles, fulfilling duties and obligations, and respecting rights and moral duties. One of the most influential forms of deontology is the moral philosophy of Immanuel Kant, particularly as articulated in his work Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals and Critic of Practical Reason. Kantian deontology is based on the idea of the categorical imperative, which is a universal moral law that applies to all rational beings. According to Kant, moral principles are derived from reason and are binding on all rational agents by virtue of their capacity for rationality and autonomy. The categorical imperative is expressed in several formulations, including the principle of universality, which holds that an action is morally permissible only if its maxim can be willed as a universal law without contradiction. Another formulation is the principle of humanity, which asserts that individuals should always treat others as ends in themselves and never merely as means to an end. Deontological theories can take various different forms and may differ in their specific moral rules or principles. Some deontologists emphasize the importance of respecting individual rights and human dignity, while others focus on fulfilling duties and obligations within particular roles or relationships. Although there are some critics of deontology, which raise various different objections, including concerns about its rigid adherence to moral rules and principles, its potential to generate conflicting duties or moral dilemmas, and its limited ability to account for the consequences of actions. Critics also argue that deontology may lead to moral absolutism or dogmatism, where certain actions are considered universally right or wrong without consideration of context or consequences, such as killing is wrong, but what if you need to defend your own life, so that kind of gets a little bit iffy. Despite these criticisms, deontology continues to be a significant and influential approach within moral philosophy and ethics. Omnipotence paradoxes. Omnipotence paradoxes are thought experiments that challenge the concept of omnipotence, the attribute of having unlimited power or ability. These paradoxes raise logical or philosophical problems by posing scenarios in which an omnipotent being appears to face limitations or contradictions. One of the most famous omnipotence paradoxes is the paradox of the stone, or the "can God create a stone so heavy that even God cannot lift it?" This paradox questions whether an omnipotent being can create an object that is beyond its own ability to lift. If such a stone could be created, then the being would not be able to lift it, suggesting a limitation to its own omnipotence. On the other hand, if the being cannot create such a stone, then its omnipotence is also called into question. Another omnipotence paradox is involving the concept of omniscience. It asks whether an omnipotent being can know what it is like to not know something. If the being cannot know what it is like to not know something, then its omniscience is limited. However, if the being can know what it is like to not know something, then it is truly not omnipotent. Yet another paradox is the problem of evil, which questions how an omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent deity could allow evil and suffering to exist in the world. This paradox raises concerns about the compatibility of the attributes of omnipotence, omniscience, and benevolence. Various responses have been proposed to reconcile omnipotent paradoxes. Some argue that omnipotence does not entail the ability to perform logically contradictory actions, such as creating a stone too heavy to lift. Others suggest that omnipotence should be understood as the ability to do something that is logically possible. Still, others propose redefinitions of omnipotence or reject the concept altogether. Omnipotent paradoxes continue to be debated among philosophers, theologians, and scholars of religion, prompting reflection on the nature of divine attributes and the limits of human understanding. While these paradoxes may not have a definitive solution, They show the complexities and challenges involved in grappling with such concepts such as omnipotence and divine attributes. Parable of the Invisible Gardener. The Parable of the Invisible Gardener is a thought experiment proposed by the British philosopher Anthony Flew in his 1955 essay, Theology and Its Falsification. The parable serves as a critique of religious claims, particularly these concerning the existence of God and the problem of evil. The parable goes as follows. Two explorers stumble upon a garden in the forest. One of them, who is skeptical, proposes that there is no gardener. The other, however, insists that there is indeed a gardener. To settle the matter, they set up a watch and wait for the gardener to appear. Days pass, but no gardener is seen. The skeptical explorer suggests that there is no gardener after all. The believer, however, comes up with various different explanations for why the gardener hasn't been seen. Perhaps the gardener is invisible, or just not being able to be seen, or doesn't come during the day but only the night. The believer continues to make excuses for the absence of evidence, adjusting his beliefs to accommodate any observations made. In this parable, Flew uses the analogy of the invisible gardener to critique religious claims about the existence of God. He argues that religious believers often make unfalsifiable claims, which cannot be tested or verified empirically. No matter what evidence is presented, or lack thereof, the believer can always come up with an ad hoc explanations to maintain their belief in God. Flew's parable highlights the problem of falsifiability in religious discourse. If a claim cannot be tested or falsified, then it is not subject to empirical verification and lies outside the realm of scientific inquiry. This raises questions about the rationality of holding beliefs that are immune to evidence or counter-arguments. Critics of Flew's parable argue that it oversimplifies religious belief and fails to capture the richness and complexity of theological arguments. They contend that religious claims involve more than just empirical evidence and may be grounded in personal experiences, faith, tradition, and other factors that cannot be easily dismissed. Nevertheless, the parable of the invisible gardener remains a powerful illustration of the challenges inherent in justifying religious beliefs in the face of empirical skepticism. Allegory of the Cave. The allegory of the cave is one of the most famous metaphors in Western philosophy. Presented by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato in his work The Republic, it serves as an allegory for the nature of human perception, knowledge, and enlightenment. In this allegory, Plato invites us to imagine a group of people who have been chained inside a dark cave since birth. These people can only see the shadows cast by objects passing in front of a fire behind them. They perceive these shadows as reality, as they have never experienced anything else. Their understanding of the world is limited to what they see on the cave wall. One day, one of the prisoners is freed from their chains and forced to turn around and look at the fire. At first, the prisoner is dazzled by the light and cannot see the objects casting the shadow. However, as their eyes adjust, they begin to see the true nature of the objects and realize that the shadows were merely illusions. The freed prisoner is then brought out of the cave and into the sunlight, where they are initially blinded by the brightness. Gradually, their eyes adjust and they are able to see the world as it truly is, bathed in sunlight. They come to understand that the world inside the cave was just a dim reflection of reality. Upon realizing the truth, the freed prisoners feels compelled to return to the cave and share their newfound knowledge with the other prisoners. However, when they try to explain what they have seen, the other prisoners are skeptical and resistant. They cannot comprehend anything beyond the shadows because they have always just known the shadows, and reject the freed prisoners' attempts to enlighten them. The allegory of the cave is rich in symbolism and metaphor. The cave represents the world of appearances, where people are deceived by their senses and perceive only shadows of reality. The journey out of the cave symbolizes the process of enlightenment and philosophical awakening, as individuals come to understand the true nature of reality through reason and contemplation. The allegory also highlights the challenges of education and communication, as those who have not experienced enlightenment may be resistant to new ideas and truths that challenge their preconceptions. It serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of critical thinking, open-mindedness, and the pursuit of knowledge in overcoming ignorance and understanding the world more deeply. What is consciousness? Consciousness is one of the most intriguing and fundamental concepts in philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience. It refers to the state or quality of being aware of an external object or something within oneself. Despite its ubiquity in our daily experience, defining consciousness precisely has proven to be a daunting task for philosophers and scientists alike. One of the central questions surrounding consciousness is the so-called hard problem, posed by philosopher David Chalmers. This problem revolves around understanding how and why physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experiences. In other words, why does the firing of neurons and the interaction of molecules lead to the rich tapestry of sensations, thoughts, and emotions that we perceive as consciousness? Various theories have been proposed to tackle this enigma. One prominent view is physicalism, which asserts that consciousness is entirely reducible to physical processes in the brain. According to this perspective, once we fully understand the workings of the brain, we will be able to fully explain consciousness. However, critics argue that physicalism fails to account for the qualitative aspects of conscious experience, such as the vividness of colors or the richness of emotions. Another influential theory is dualism, which posits that consciousness is not entirely reducible to just physical processes, and that there exists a distinct mental substance separate from the physical body. Dualists argue that consciousness cannot be explained solely in terms of brain activity, and that there must be something non-physical about the mind. However, dualism faces its own set of challenges, including the problem of interaction between the mental and physical realms. A third perspective is panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe and is present at all levels of reality, even in elementary particles. According to panpsychism, consciousness is not solely confined to complex organisms like humans, but is a fundamental aspect of the cosmos itself. While panpsychism offers a novel way of approaching the problem of consciousness, it raises questions about what exactly constitutes conscious matter and conscious experience, and how it emerges from non-conscious matter. In addition to these theories, there are numerous other approaches to understanding consciousness, including emergentism, idealism, and neutral monism. Despite the diversity of views, the nature of consciousness remains a deeply puzzling and hotly debated topic in philosophy and science. Moral relativism/absolutism. Moral relativism and moral absolutism represent two contrasting perspectives on the nature of morality and ethical principles. Each approach offers unique insights and raises questions about the foundations of moral judgments and the diversity of ethical beliefs across cultures and individuals. Moral relativism asserts that moral principles are not universally acceptable, but are instead dependent on cultural norms, societal conventions, personal beliefs, and individual perspectives. According to this view, what is considered morally right or wrong varies from one culture to another, or even from one individual to another. Cultural relativism, a subset of moral relativism, suggests that moral judgments should be understood within the context of specific cultural practices and traditions. From the perspective of moral relativism, there are no objective or universal moral truths that apply to all people in all situations. One of the key strengths of moral relativism is its recognition of the diversity of moral values and practices across different cultures and societies. This perspective encourages tolerance and respect for all cultural differences and challenges the idea of imposing one set of moral standards on everyone, because that's basically impossible to do. Additionally, moral relativism acknowledges the role of subjective experiences and individual perspectives in shaping moral beliefs and judgments. However, moral relativism also faces several criticisms. Critics argue that it leads to moral skepticism, as it implies that there are no objective criteria for evaluating the morality of actions or practices. Furthermore, moral relativism raises questions about the possibility of moral progress or improvement if moral judgments are purely relative to cultural or individual preferences. In contrast, moral absolutism posits that certain moral principles are universally valid and apply to all people regardless of culture or personal differences. According to this view, there are objective moral truths that are independent of human opinions or cultural contexts. Moral absolutists typically appeal to concepts like human rights, dignity, or natural law to ground their moral principles. One of the main strengths of moral absolutism is its ability to provide clear guidelines for ethical behavior by possessing universal moral standards. Moral absolutism offers a stable foundation for making moral judgments and resolving ethical dilemmas. Additionally, moral absolutism can serve as a basis for advocating for social justice and human rights on a global scale. However, moral absolutism has been also criticized for its potential to lead to dogmatism and moral rigidity. Critics argue that absolutist positions may fail to account for the complexities of real-life situations and the nuances of ethical decision-making. Furthermore, disagreements about which moral principles are truly absolute can lead to conflicts between individuals and cultures. In summary, moral relativism and moral absolutism represent two contrasting approaches to understanding morality and ethics. While moral relativism emphasizes the diversity of moral values and the importance of cultural context, moral absolutism asserts that existence of universal moral truths that apply to all people. Both perspectives offer valuable insights into the nature of morality and how complex it actually is. Reductionism. Reductionism is a philosophical approach that seeks to explain complex phenomena by reducing them to simpler or more fundamental components. It is a reductionist strategy to understand and explain complex systems by breaking them down into smaller parts, often at the level of fundamental physical entities or principles. Reductionism is pervasive in various scientific disciplines, including physics, biology, and psychology, as well as in philosophy. In the realm of physics, reductionism manifests in attempts to describe the behavior of matter and energy in terms of fundamental particles and forces. For example, physicists aim to explain the behavior of macroscopic objects such as planets or stars by understanding the interactions of their constituent atoms and subatomic particles. And the reason I'm explaining physics and biology and stuff like that is because it all kind of corresponds together to help understand the philosophy better. So even though this isn't like a physics iceberg, having the physics and the biology and other sort of stuff with these entries helps understand the philosophy of it. So anyways, in biology, reductionism is evident in the study of living organisms at the molecular and cellular level. Biologists often seek to understand complex biological processes, such as development, metabolism, and genetics, by examining the interactions of genes, proteins, and other molecular components. In psychology, reductionism can be seen in attempts to explain complex mental phenomena such as consciousness, emotions, and behavior in terms of underlying neural processes and mechanisms. Neuroscientists study the structure and function of the brain to uncover the neural basis of cognition and behavior, with the aim of reducing psychological phenomena to their neurological substrates so it's easier to understand. While reductionism has been a powerful and fruitful approach in many scientific disciplines, it also has its limitations and criticism. One common criticism is that reductionism may oversimplify complex phenomena or things by focusing exclusively on their most basic components, which might thereby neglecting emergent properties in higher level interactions. Emergent properties are characteristics of a system that arise from the interactions of its parts, but cannot be fully understood or predicted by examining those parts in isolation. Additionally, reductionism may fail to capture the holistic and context-dependent nature of many phenomena, particularly in complex systems where interactions among components are non-linear and unpredictable. Critics argue that reductionism may lead to an incomplete or distorted understanding of reality by ignoring the rich complexity and interconnectedness of everything in nature. Despite these criticisms, reductionism continues to be a valuable thing in science and physics and biology because it helps make everything a lot more understandable if you just break it down and kind of sound out what things are made out of. Wholesome. Wholesome is an interdisciplinary concept that posits that systems possess properties as wholes apart from the properties of their component parts. Yeah, confusing. This idea challenges the reductionist approach, which seeks to explain complex phenomena by breaking them down into simpler components. The aphorism, which is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, encapsulates the essence of wholesome, highlighting the idea that the totality of a system exhibits properties that cannot be fully understood by examining its individual parts in isolation. The concept of wholesome has broad implications across various scientific disciplines and lifestyle practices. In scientific fields, wholesome informs methodologies by recognizing emergent properties of systems. qualities that arise from interactions among their components and cannot be predicted solely from the properties of these components. These emergent properties provide insights into the behavior and functioning of complex systems, such as biological organisms or social structures. Wholesome stands in opposition to reductionism. Proponents of wholesome argue that the search for emergent properties within systems demonstrates the validity of their perspective, highlighting the need to consider systems as an integrated wholes rather than mere collections of parts. The term wholesome was coined by John Smuts in his 1926 book, Wholesome and Evolution. Smuts articulated several features of reality associated with wholesome. Firstly, he claimed that every scientifically measurable thing, whether physical or psychological, possesses a nature as a whole beyond its parts. Secondly, Smuts viewed wholesome as the driving force behind evolution, arguing that it fosters creative responses to environmental stressors and promotes the advance of systems to more advanced states. Finally, Smuts used wholesome to explain the concrete nature of the universe, emphasizing its synthetic, ordering, and organizing activity. Wholesome has also found resonance in physics, particularly with the advent of quantum mechanics. In this context, wholesome refers to the non-separality of physical systems from their parts, especially in quantum phenomena. And yeah, it goes deep into quantum stuff. I don't know how to explain that, but very confusing stuff getting down here in this iceberg, so hope you're still sticking with me. Noumenon is a term from the philosophical system of Immanuel Kant, particularly central to his work in epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, which we went over in the first tier, I think, and metaphysics, which is the study of reality. In Kant's philosophy, a noumenon refers to a thing as it is in itself, independent of our perceptions of it. This contrasts with phenomena, which are the objects of our experience as they appear to us through our senses and are filtered through the categories of our understanding. This noumenal realm, according to Kant, is inaccessible to human knowledge because our cognitive faculties, such as space, time, and causality, structure and organize our experience of the world. These faculties shape the way we perceive and understand phenomena, but are not applicable to things as they exist beyond our perception. Kant argued that while we can never directly know noumena, we can still possess their existence as a necessary postulate to make sense of our experience. For example, we can infer that existence of a noumenal reality that causes the phenomena we observe, even though we can never directly apprehend it. The concept of noumenon has profound implications for Kant's epistemology and metaphysics. It establishes limits to human knowledge, suggesting that there are aspects of reality that transcend our understanding. Additionally, it underlines the importance of distinguishing between the world as it appears to us and the world as it exists independently of our perceptions. The notion of noumenon has influenced subsequent philosophical thought, particularly in discussions about the nature of reality, the limitations of human knowledge, and the relationship between mind and world. Absurdism. Absurdism is a philosophical perspective that's one of my favorite philosophies, actually, that confronts the inherent conflict between the human tendency to seek meaning and purpose in life and the apparent lack of any objective meaning or purpose in the universe. It originated in the works of existentialist philosophers, notably Albert Camus, and is often associated with existentialism. Through it represents a distinct approach to existential questions. At the heart of absurdism is the recognition of the absurdity of human existence, the fundamental mismatch between our innate desire for meaning and the indifference or chaos of the universe. Absurdism acknowledges that humans are meaning-seeking creatures, constantly searching for significance and purpose in our lives. Yet it asserts that the universe is inherently meaningless and indifferent to human concerns. One of the key ideas in absurdism is the notion of the absurd, which refers to the sense of disorientation and confusion that arises from the confrontation between human longing for meaning and the absurdity of existence. This absurdity is exemplified by the realization that life is ultimately futile, that death is inevitable, and that the universe operates without regard for human desires or aspirations. Albert Camus, perhaps the most famous proponent of absurdism, explored these themes in his works, particularly in his essay The Myth of Sisyphus and his novel The Stranger. In The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus famously declares that the struggle itself towards the height is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. This statement encapsulates the absurd hero's defiance in the face of an absurd universe. Despite the apparent meaninglessness of Sisyphus' eternal task of rolling a boulder uphill only to have it roll back down, Camus argues that this very act of confronting and embracing the absurd can lead to a kind of existential freedom and fulfillment. Absurdism does not advocate for nihilism, the belief that life is inherently meaningless and devoid of value. Instead, it encourages individuals to embrace the absurdity of existence while simultaneously creating their own meaning and values in the face of it. This entails accepting the inherent uncertainty and uncertainties of life, finding joy and significance in the pursuit of personal passions and relationships, and acknowledging the absurdity of human endeavors while continuing to engage in them wholeheartedly. In summary, absurdism is a philosophical perspective that grapples with the tension between human desire for meaning and the apparent meaninglessness of the universe. It encourages individuals to confront the absurdity of existence with courage and defiance, finding freedom and fulfillment in the act of creating meaning and value in a fundamentally absurd world. Determinism. Determinism is a philosophical concept that asserts that all events, including human actions, are determined by causes external to the will. In other words, every event, including human decisions and actions, is ultimately the result of preceding causes, which we have talked about a little bit earlier with other kind of things similar to this. But anyways, every event, including human decisions and actions, is ultimately the result of preceding causes, whether they be physical, biological, psychological, or environmental. This view suggests that the universe operates according to fixed laws, and given the same initial conditions, the same outcomes will always occur. Determinism can be traced back to ancient Greek philosophy, but it gained prominence in the modern era with the rise of scientific determinism, which holds that the laws of physics govern all phenomena, including human behavior. This perspective suggests that if we had complete knowledge of the present state of the universe and the laws governing it, we could predict with certainty all future events. There are various forms of determinism, including hard determinism. Hard determinism, this view holds that free will is an illusion in that all events, including human actions, are predetermined by other causes. According to hard determinism, individuals have no genuine ability to choose their actions, as these choices are determined by factors beyond their control. Number 2, which is soft determinism. Soft determinism reconciles determinism with the concept of free will by arguing that freedom and determinism are compatible. Proponents of soft determinism assert that although our actions are determined by various factors such as our desires, beliefs, and external circumstances, we can still be considered free as long as our actions are in accordance with our own desires and motives. Number 3, biological determinism. Biological determinism says that human behavior is determined by biological factors such as genetics and neurobiology. Biological determinism suggests that our genes and brain chemistry significantly influence our thoughts, emotions, and actions. Determinism has significant implications for ethics, morality, and personal responsibility. If all events are determined by a preceding cause, questions arise about the nature of moral responsibility and accountability, because can you be held accountable for things that you didn't even technically have control over, according to determinism? Some argue that determinism undermines the basis for holding individuals morally responsible for their actions, as they are ultimately determined by factors beyond their control. Others contend that moral responsibility can still be meaningful within a deterministic framework, as it is based on societal norms, values, and the consequences of actions. Despite the challenges and arguments posed by determinism, debates about free will and determinism continue to stimulate philosophical questions and scientific research, offering insights into the nature of the brain and just free will. Nihilism. Nihilism is a philosophical standpoint that asserts the absence of inherent meaning, purpose, or value in life in the universe. Stemming from the Latin word nihil, meaning nothing, nihilism suggests that existence is devoid of objective meaning or intrinsic worth. Yeah, pretty depressing. This philosophical outlook challenges traditional beliefs in morality, religion, and knowledge, often leading to skepticism and existential despair. One of the earliest proponents of nihilism and creators of nihilism was Friedrich Nietzsche, who famously proclaimed that God is dead, to illustrate the decline of traditional values and the loss of faith in absolute truths. Nietzsche argued that the absence of divine authority would inevitably lead to the collapse of traditional moral frameworks, leaving humanity adrift in the universe devoid of meaning. According to Nietzsche, the recognition of this fundamental emptiness could either lead to nihilistic despair or serve as an opportunity for individuals to create their own values and embrace the fulfillment of life. Existential nihilism, another prominent variant of nihilistic thought, emphasizes the absurdity of human existence in a universe that appears indifferent to human concerns. So yeah, very similar to absurdism. Existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus explored the existential condition about absurdity, grappling with the inherent tension between the human desire for meaning and the inherent meaninglessness of existence. For existential nihilists, the absence of inherent meaning does not necessitate despair, but rather invites individuals to confront the existential void and embrace their freedom to create subjective meaning in an indifferent universe. Epistemological nihilism challenges the possibility of attaining knowledge or objective truth. This skeptical stance questions the reliability of human perception, language, and cognition in accurately representing reality. Epistemological nihilists argue that all knowledge claims are ultimately contingent upon subjective interpretations and cultural biases, rendering the search for absolute truth futile. Instead of seeking certainty, epistemological nihilism encourages intellectual humility and open-mindedness, acknowledging the limitations of human understanding. Moral nihilism rejects the existence of objective moral values or ethical principles. According to moral nihilists, moral judgments are ultimately arbitrary constructs shaped by cultural norms, individual preferences, and evolutionary imperatives. Without a transcendent moral framework to ground ethical claims, moral nihilism denies the existence of inherent moral obligations or universal moral truths. However, moral nihilism does not necessarily entail moral relativism, as it does not affirm the validity of any particular moral system or value hierarchy. Stoicism. Stoicism is a philosophical school of thought that originated in ancient Greece around the 3rd century BCE and flourished in ancient Rome. So yeah, this philosophy, idea, or school of thought has been out there for a while. It offers a practical philosophy for living a virtuous and fulfilling life, emphasizing personal resilience, inner peace, and ethical conduct in the face of adversity. Central to Stoic teachings is the concept of living in accordance with nature, which involves accepting the natural order of the universe and recognizing one's place within it. Stoics believe that the key to a good life lies in cultivating virtues such as wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline, which enable individuals to navigate life's challenges with confidence and integrity. One of the foundational principles of Stoicism is the dichotomy of control, which distinguishes between things that are within our control, such as your thoughts, actions, and values, and things that are beyond our control, such as external events, other people's actions, and the passage of time. Stoics advocate focusing our efforts on what is within our control while accepting with confidence those things are beyond our control. So just don't worry about things that are beyond your control, thereby freeing ourselves from unnecessary anxiety and frustration. Another key Stoic teaching is the practice of negative visualization, which involves contemplating the impermanence of things and imagining the loss of what we hold dear. By regularly reflecting on the transient nature of life and the possibility of loss, Stoics aim to cultivate gratitude for what they have and to develop resilience in the face of adversity. Stoicism also emphasizes the importance of living in accordance with reason and maintaining a sense of inner tranquility amid life's ups and downs. Stoic practices such as mindful meditation, self-reflection, and journaling are employed to cultivate a state of psychological well-being and to foster greater self-awareness. Throughout history, Stoicism has exerted a profound influence on various aspects of Western thought and culture, from ethics to psychology to literature and politics. Its timeless teachings continue to resonate with people seeking guidance on how to lead a meaningful and virtuous life in an unpredictable and often chaotic world. Existentialism. Existentialism is a philosophical movement that emerged in the 19th and 20th centuries, particularly in Europe, and gained prominence in the aftermath of World War II. It is characterized by a focus on individual existence, freedom, choice, and the search for meaning in an inherently absurd or indifferent universe. At the heart of existentialist thought is the idea that existence precedes essence, meaning that individuals are responsible for defining themselves through their actions and choices rather than being predetermined by external forces such as God, nature, or society. This emphasis on personal freedom and responsibility places existentialism in a stark contrast to deterministic philosophies that possess a preordained purpose or meaning to life. Existentialist thinkers such as Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and Albert Camus explore the human condition in the face of absurdity, alienation, and the absence of inherent meaning. Sartre famously declared that existence precedes essence and argued that humans are condemned to be free, meaning that we are burdened with the responsibility of creating our own values and defining our own essence through our choices. Existentialism also grapples with the theme of authenticity, urging individuals to confront the reality of their existence and to live in accordance with their true selves rather than conforming to societal expectations or external norms. Authenticity involves embracing one's freedom and taking ownership of one's actions, even in the face of uncertainty or adversity. The existentialist notion of anguish or existential dread arises from the recognition of the inherent absurdity and meaninglessness of the existence. This existential angst and anguish stems from the tension between the human desire for meaning and the realization that life is ultimately devoid of intrinsic purpose or value. However, existentialists argue that confronting these anguish can lead to a deeper understanding of oneself and a greater appreciation for the richness of human experience. Existentialism also emphasizes the importance of individual choice and responsibility in shaping one's destiny. While acknowledging the limitations imposed by external circumstances, existentialists advocate for embracing the freedom to make meaningful choices and to take ownership of one's life, regardless of the existential uncertainties and challenges that may arise. Overall, existentialism offers a profound exploration of the human condition, inviting individuals to confront the complexities of existence with courage, authenticity, and a commitment to personal growth and self-discovery. It continues to inspire individuals to ask questions of meaning, identity, and purpose in a world that appears indifferent or absurd. All right, now onto tier 5, and we're 2 hours into this thing, so if you're still watching, consider subscribing to the channel. I mean, you already like the video this much, so you'll definitely like other videos this much, so 2 hours in, consider subscribing. All right, anyways, onto the first entry of tier 5, being egoism. Egoism is a philosophical perspective that places primary emphasis on the self as the ultimate reference point for ethical decision-making and personal conduct. It posits that individuals ought to act in their own self-interest, prioritizing their own needs, desires, and well-being above those of others. Egoism can manifest in various forms, including psychological egoism and ethical egoism. Psychological egoism is the descriptive claim that individuals are inherently motivated by self-interest in all of their actions, even those that may appear to be altruistic on the surface, which is charitable or just like selfless. It technically isn't selfless because it's always acting in your own self-interest, at least according to egoism. According to psychological egoism, every human action, whether consciously or unconsciously, is ultimately driven by their desire to maximize one's own pleasure or minimize one's own pain. Advocates of psychological egoism argue that apparent acts of altruism are merely disguised forms of self-interest, such as seeking approval, avoiding guilt, or maintaining social status. Ethical egoism, on the other hand, is the normative claim that individuals ought to act in their own self-interest as a matter of moral duty or obligation. Ethical egoists assert that individuals have no moral obligation to prioritize the interest or well-being of others above their own, and that each person should pursue their own happiness and flourishing as the highest ethical imperative. From the perspective of ethical egoism, altruistic actions are permissible but not obligatory, and individuals are justified in pursuing their own self-interest without regarding for the welfare of others. Critics of egoism argue that it promotes selfishness, greed, and disregard for well-being of others, undermine the foundations of moral responsibility and social cooperation. They contend that a purely egoistic worldview fails to account for the moral value of empathy, compassion, and altruism, which are essential for fostering meaningful relationships, building community, and promoting the common good. Proponents of egoism, however, maintain that prioritizing self-interest is both rational and morally justified, as individuals are best equipped to understand and pursue their own needs and desires. They argue that egoism encourages self-reliance, personal autonomy, and individual flourishing, thereby empowering individuals to lead fulfilling and meaningful lives. Ultimately, the debate over egoism raises fundamental questions about the nature of morality, the balance between self-interest and charity, and the role of individual agency in shaping ethical behavior. While egoism does offer a proactive challenge to conventional ethical theories, its implications for personal conduct and social relations continue to spark lively philosophical discourse and debate. Internalism. Internalism is a philosophical position that pertains to various domains, including epistemology, ethics, and philosophy of mind. Broadly speaking, internalism holds to certain aspects of a particular domain, such as justification in epistemology or moral motivation in ethics, are dependent on or accessible to the internal mental states of individuals. In epistemology, internalism concerns the nature of justification and knowledge, particularly regarding what factors contribute to a belief's justification. Internalists argue that justification for beliefs depends solely on factors within the cognitive and perceptual realm of the believer, such as introspection, reasoning, or sensory experiences. According to this view, a belief is justified if it is appropriately based on a believer's mental states or experiences. Internalism thus emphasizes the role of conscious awareness and cognitive processes in determining the epistemic statute of beliefs. Ethical internalism, on the other hand, focuses on the relationship between moral judgments and motivation. Internalists maintain that moral judgments necessarily entail motivational force, that is, to sincerely judge an action as morally right or wrong is to be motivated to act accordingly. Ethical internalism suggests that moral reasons are internal to agents, arising from their moral attitudes or commitments, and that moral motivation is inherent to the act of moral judgment itself. This perspective contrasts with ethical externalism, which allows for the possibility of moral judgments without corresponding motivation to act morally. In philosophy of mind, internalism concerns the nature of mental content and its relationship to the external world. Internalists argue that the meaning or content of mental states, such as beliefs or desires, is determined solely by factors internal to the individual's mind, such as mental representations or neural states. This view opposes externalism, which holds that the content of mental states depends, at least in part, on factors external to the individual, such as the individual's environment or causal history. Internalism has been subject to various criticisms and debates within each of these philosophical domains. Critics argue that internalism may be too restrictive or fail to capture important aspects of human cognition, motivation, or knowledgeable acquisition. Externalism is a philosophical state that contrasts with internalism across various different domains, so these two are just contrasting each other, including epistemology, ethics, and philosophy of mind. Unlike internalism, which emphasizes the role of internal mental states or factors, externalism, which you might guess, holds that certain aspects of a particular domain are dependent on or influenced by factors external to the individual's mind. In epistemology, externalism challenges internalist views about the nature of justification and knowledge. Externalists argue that justification and knowledge are not solely determined by factors within the individual's cognitive or perceptual realm, but can also depend on external factors, such as the reliability of one's cognitive faculties or the causal connections between beliefs and the external world. According to externalism, a belief may be justified or knowledge producing even if the individual is unaware of the relevant justifying factors, or if the belief arises from reliable but unconscious cognitive processes. Ethical externalism similarly challenges the internalist view that moral judgments necessarily entail motivational force. Externalists argue that moral judgments can be made without corresponding motivation to act morally, and that moral reasons can be external to the individual's psychological states. This perspective allows for the possibility of genuine moral judgment without the internal motivation to act in accordance with those judgments, thereby accommodating cases of moral weakness or apathy. Externalism has generated significant debate and discussion within philosophy, particularly regarding its implications for theories of knowledge, ethics, and mind. Critics of externalism raise concerns about the potential for skepticism and the reliability of external factors in determining justification, moral reasoning, or mental content. Nevertheless, externalism continues to be an influential and provocative position that prompts further exploration into the complex interactions between individuals and their external environments that affect their mind. Tier 6. And sorry if this is a little bit boring to any of you, but this is the ultimate philosophy iceberg. So it has a lot of philosophical terms and stuff like that. So it just is including basically everything. So sorry if they're not all interesting, but I think it's interesting. So I hope a few of you out there are still watching and think it's interesting. So all right, anyways, on to tier 6. Foundationalism. Foundationalism is a philosophical theory concerning the structure of knowledge and belief, particularly in epistemology, which deals with the nature, scope, and limits of knowledge. Foundationalism posits that knowledge and justified belief are built upon a secure foundation of basic beliefs or self-evident truths, which serve as a starting point for rational inquiry and justification. At the heart of foundationalism is the idea that there are certain beliefs or propositions that are self-evident, meaning that they are evident to the individual's rational faculties and do not require further justification. These foundational beliefs serve as the bedrock upon which the edifice of knowledge is constructed, providing a secure epistemic foundation from which other beliefs can be derived or justified through rational inference. Foundationalism typically distinguishes between two types of beliefs: basic beliefs and non-basic beliefs. Pretty simple, just the difference, non-basic and basic. Basic beliefs are those that do not depend on or derive from other beliefs for their justification. They are directly apprehended by the individual's rational faculties or are self-evident in some sense to that person. Non-basic beliefs, on the other hand, are justified by appeal to basic beliefs through a process of rational inference or deduction. The foundationalist project involves identifying and justifying the set of basic beliefs upon which all other knowledge claims can be grounded upon. These basic beliefs are often thought to include propositions such as "I exist," "the external world exists," or "the laws of logic are valid," which are taken to be universally accepted and self-evident. Critics of foundationalism raise various objections, including concerns about the possibility of identifying infallible or incongruable beliefs, the problem of circulating and justifying basic beliefs, and the challenge of accounting for the diversity of human experience and perspective. Additionally, some critics argue that foundationalism fails to capture the inherently social and contextual nature of knowledge acquisition and justification, as well as the role of background beliefs, cognitive biases, and cultural influences in shaping individual epistemic commitments. Despite these challenges, foundationalism remains a prominent and influential theory in epistemology, providing a decent framework for understanding the structure of knowledge and the process of justification. Mary's Room. Mary's Room is a philosophical thought experiment proposed by Frank Jackson, originally in the context of philosophy of mind. The scenario of Mary's Room is designed to probe the nature of consciousness and the relationship between physical knowledge and the phenomenal experience. In the thought experiment, Mary is a brilliant neuroscientist who has spent her entire life in a black and white room, devoid of any color. Despite her lack of direct experience with color, Mary has complete knowledge of the physical and neuropsychology aspects of color vision. So she's a genius at color, but she's never seen color. She knows everything there is to know about the wavelengths of light, the functioning of the human eye and brain, and the neural processes underlying color perception. The crux of the thought experiment arises when Mary is released from her black and white room and experiences color for the first time. The question posed by the scenario is whether Mary learns anything new upon experiencing color, despite her exhaustive physical knowledge of the phenomenon. In other words, does Mary gain new knowledge about color that cannot be captured by her comprehensive understanding of its physical properties? The thought experiment is often used to challenge physicalism, the view that all phenomena, including consciousness, can be fully explained in terms of physical processes. Proponents of the argument suggest that Mary's newfound experience of color demonstrates the existence of qualia, or subjective conscious experiences, that cannot be reduced to purely physical descriptions. Critics of the argument offer various responses, including the claim that Mary's experience merely adds experimental knowledge rather than factual knowledge. Others argue that Mary's knowledge is not truly exhaustive, as there may be aspects of color perception that cannot be captured through purely physical descriptions or talking. So I can't purely describe color to you, and that'd be impossible, technically. you can't learn everything just from descriptions. You might need to experience it to know it. Overall, Mary's room serves as a provocative illustration of the complex relationship between physical knowledge and subjective experience, raising questions about the nature of consciousness and the limits of explanation and description. The Chinese Room. The Chinese Room is a famous philosophical thought experiment proposed by John Searle to challenge the claim that computers or computational systems can genuinely understand and produce human-like intelligence. The scenario aims to highlight the distinction between syntax, which is the manipulation of symbols, and semantics, meaning. Semantics means meaning. And to question whether syntax alone is sufficient for understanding. In the thought experiment, imagine a person who does not understand Chinese is placed inside a room. This person, often referred to as the man in the Chinese room, receives Chinese symbols such as characters or sentences through a slot in the wall. They have a set of instructions written in their native language that tell them how to manipulate these symbols according to certain rules. The person follows these instructions meticulously, producing responses in Chinese without understanding the meaning of the symbols. From the outside, to someone who interacts with the room by passing Chinese messages through the slot and receiving responses, it may seem as though the room understands Chinese. However, the person inside the room does not actually understand Chinese. They are merely following syntactic rules to process and generate responses. Searle's argument from the Chinese room is often used to challenge strong forms of artificial intelligence that claim to achieve human-like understanding or consciousness solely through computational processes. Searle argues that simply processing symbols according to rules is not sufficient for understanding anything. Even if a computer can pass the Turing test or mimic human-like behavior, it does not mean that it understands the meaning of the symbols it manipulates. Critics of the Chinese room argument offer various responses, including the claim that understanding can emerge from complex computational processes, even if individual components do not understand. Others argue that Searle's thought experiment may overlook the possibility of future advances in AI that could lead to genuinely intelligent systems. Overall, the Chinese room is a pretty thought-provoking illustration, and I feel like this one is more relevant than ever because of how many AIs have been coming out recently. I think this thought experiment is more prevalent and, necessary to think about than ever. All right, now into Tier 7, Danto's Red Squares. Arthur Danto's Red Squares is a thought experiment designed to illustrate the distinction between mere physical objects and artworks, as well as the role of interpretation and context in determining the status of an object as an artwork. In this thought experiment, Danto describes two identical red squares. One is simply a physical object, while the other is a work of art. Visually, both squares appear identical. Each is a flat, two-dimensional shape painted entirely in red. However, according to Danto, there is a crucial difference between the two squares. The red square that is an artwork is imbued with meaning and significance beyond its physical appearance. The distinction between the two squares lies in their respective contexts and interpretations. The physical object, despite its visual similarity to the artwork, lacks the artistic intent and cultural context that would transform into an artwork. It is merely a red square, nothing more, nothing less. On the other hand, the red square that is an artwork is situated within the context of the art world, where it is endowed with symbolic, conceptual, or aesthetic meaning by the artist and/or the viewer. Danto's thought experiment challenges the notion that artworks can be defined solely in terms of their physical properties or aesthetic qualities. Instead, he argues that the status of an object as an artwork depends on its interpretation within the broader framework of artistic practice and cultural discourse. Artworks are not merely physical objects, but rather entities that invite interpretation, provoke thought, and engage with the complexities of the human experience. Although, I don't know, maybe this just kind of proves that art isn't as meaningful. I don't know. This one is definitely interesting, but let me know what you guys think down below, because I feel like this kind of proves that art most of the time is kind of dumb and you have to give it meaning. I don't know. At least modern art. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below, because this one's definitely interesting. Laplace's daemon. Laplace's daemon is a concept introduced by the French mathematician and astronomer Pierre Simon Laplace in the early 19th century. It represents a hypothetical, super-intelligent being or entity that possesses complete knowledge of the positions and velocities of every particle in the universe, as well as the ability to possess the information instantaneously and predict with certainty the future state of the universe at any given time. Laplace's demon is based on the deterministic worldview of classical mechanics, which holds that the behavior of particles and systems in the universe is governed by deterministic laws of nature. According to this view, if one were to know the precise initial conditions of the universe and all the relevant laws of physics, one could theoretically calculate and predict the future state of the universe with absolute precision. The concept of Laplace's demon raises questions about determinism, free will, and the nature of scientific knowledge. If the universe operates according to the deterministic laws and is fully predictable, does this imply that human actions and choices are predetermined and devoid of genuine freedom? Or does the existence of uncertainty and complexity in the real world undermine the possibility of such perfect prediction? Critics of Laplace's demon argue that it overlooks the inherent limitations of human knowledge and computational power. Even if one were to possess complete information about the current state of the universe, the sheer complexity of the systems involved and the limitations of human cognition would make it impossible to perform the necessary calculations with perfect accuracy. Furthermore, the advent of quantum mechanics in the early 20th century introduced inherent randomness and uncertainty into the fabric of reality, challenging the deterministic worldview of classical mechanics. The Übermensch, translated as the Overman or Superman, is a central concept in the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. It represents an idealized human being who transcended conventional morality and societal norms to create their own values and embrace life with vitality and creativity. Nietzsche introduced the concept of the Übermensch in his seminal work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. He envisioned the Übermensch as a figure who rejects traditional religious and moral frameworks, including the concepts of good and evil, and instead embraces the fullness of life with a sense of self-affirmation and self-overcoming. The Übermensch is not bound by conventional morality or the herd mentality of society, but instead forges their own path and lives according to their own values. They are characterized by their strength, independence, and willingness to embrace life's challenges and uncertainties with courage and creativity. In contrast to the passive conformity of the last man, who seeks comfort and security at the expense of individuality and growth, the Übermensch embodies a spirit of active self-affirmation and self-transcendence. They embrace the eternal recurrence of life, a central concept in Nietzsche's philosophy, and affirm every aspect of existence, both joyous and painful, as an opportunity for growth and self-expression. The concept of the Übermensch has been subject to various interpretations and misinterpretations over the years. Some have misunderstood it as advocating for elitism or the domination of others, while others have seen it as a call for radical individualism and self-assertion. However, Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch is more nuanced and complex. It represents a profound challenge to traditional moral and religious values and an invitation to embrace life with passion, creativity, and authenticity. Although, I think that's a decent thing to live by, because you should just be yourself and not worry about, societal conformity. Just be yourself. Don't hurt anybody. Be yourself, do what makes you happy. Russell's teapot. Russell's teapot is a famous analogy proposed by the philosopher Bertrand Russell to illustrate the burden of proof in arguments regarding the existence of God or other supernatural entities. The analogy is often used in discussions about atheism, agnosticism, and the philosophy of religion. Russell's teapot analogy goes like this. Imagine that he asserts that there is a small china teapot orbiting the sun somewhere in space between the Earth and Mars. He then challenges his audience to disprove the existence of this teapot. Since the teapot is too small to be detected by current technology and its orbit is too remote for direct observation, Russell argues that it is unreasonable to expect anyone to prove or disprove its existence. Therefore, he concludes that the burden of proof lies with the person making the claim. In this case, the person asserting the existence of the teapot. The analogy is intended to highlight the principle of parsimony, also known as Occam's razor, which states that one should not multiply entities beyond necessity. In the case of Russell's teapot, the existence of an orbiting teapot is unnecessary and unfalsifiable assumption, much like the existence of a deity or other supernatural beings whose existence cannot be conclusively demonstrated or refuted. Russell's teapot serves as a powerful rhetorical device to shift the burden of proof onto those making extraordinary claims, particularly in debates about the existence of God or the supernatural. It challenges believers to provide evidence or arguments to support their claims, rather than relying on the absence of evidence to justify their beliefs. Overall, Russell's teapot encourages critical thinking and skepticism by highlighting the importance of evidence, reason, and rational inquiry in evaluating claims about the nature of reality and the existence of supernatural entities or deities or God. Tier 8. Mereological nihilism. Mereological nihilism is a philosophical position concerning the nature of objects and their composition. At its core, mereological nihilism denies the existence of composite objects, arguing that everything that exists is ultimately reducible to fundamental building blocks or entities. In mereological nihilism, composite objects such as tables, chairs, and humans are considered to be mereological fictions, illusions created by our conceptualization and language. According to this view, there are no such things as wholes composed of parts. Rather, there are only fundamental building blocks themselves. One way to understand mereological nihilism is through the analogy of a heap of sand. When we refer to a heap of sand, we are implicitly treating it as a single entity. However, upon closer examination, we realize that a heap of sand is composed of individual grains of sand. Mereological nihilism extends this reasoning to all objects, arguing that what we perceive as wholes are merely collections of parts without any unity. Mereological nihilism raises several philosophical questions and challenges. One of the main challenges is accounting for the apparent unity and identity of objects in our everyday experience. If composite objects do not exist, how do we explain our perception of them and their apparent persistence over time? Additionally, mereological nihilism has implications for various areas of philosophy, including metaphysics, ontology, and the philosophy of the mind. Theodicy. Theodicy is a philosophical and theological concept that addresses the problem of evil in the context of belief in an all-powerful, all-knowing, and benevolent deity. It seeks to reconcile the existence of evil and suffering in the world without the existence of a loving and just God. The term theodicy was coined by the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz in his work Essays de Théosie sur la bonté de Dieu, la liberté de l'homme, l'origine du mal, which I just totally butchered really badly, but it translates in English to Theodicy, Essays on the Goodness of God and Freedom of Man and the Origin of Evil, published in 1710. Leibniz's Theodicy aimed to defend the goodness and omnipotence of God in the face of an apparent existence of evil and suffering in the world. The problem of evil arises from the observation that the world contains instances of suffering, pain, and moral wrongdoing, which seem incompatible with the existence of an all-loving and all-powerful God. If God is truly omnipotent, why does he allow evil to exist? And if God is truly benevolent, why does he not intervene to prevent suffering? Various approaches to theodicy have been proposed throughout history. Some theodicies emphasize the importance of human free will and moral responsibility, suggesting that evil is a consequence of human choices rather than divine action or indifference. According to this view, God allows evil to exist in order to preserve human freedom and the possibility of moral growth. Other theodicies appeal to the idea of a greater good or divine plan that is ultimately beyond human comprehension. They suggest that God permits evil and suffering in the world as part of a larger purpose or divine design, which may involve the promotion of virtues such as compassion, courage, and resilience. Critics of theodicy argue that these explanations fail to adequately address the problem of evil and may even undermine the attributes traditionally ascribed to God. They point to the apparent excess of the suffering in the world, as well as the lack of empirical evidence for a divine plan or greater good. But despite all of these challenges, theodicy remains an important area of question in philosophy and theology, reflecting humanity's ongoing quest to understand the nature of God and the existence of evil in the world and why God does allow evil. Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Gödel's incompleteness theorems are two celebrated results in mathematical logic, established by the Austrian mathematician Kurt Gödel in the 20th century. These theorems revolutionized the field of mathematics, demonstrating fundamental limitations within formal systems and the nature of mathematical truth. The The first incomplete list theorem, proven by Gödel in 1931, states that within any consistent formal system, they are sufficiently powerful to express basic arithmetic. There exist statements that are true but cannot be proven within the system itself. In other words, there are mathematical truths that lie beyond the reach of formal proof within the system. To establish the first incomplete list theorem, Gödel constructed a self-referential statement known as Gödel's sentence, which asserts its own unprovability within the system. This statement essentially encodes a version of the liar paradox, where it states, this statement is unprovable. If the statement were provable, it would be false, leading to a contradiction. Conversely, if the statement were unprovable, it must be true, thereby demonstrating its own unprovability. The second incomplete list theorem, also proven by Gödel in 1931, asserts that no consistent formal system that is capable of expressing basic arithmetic can prove its own consistency. In other words, if a formal system is capable of proving all true statements about arithmetic, then it would also be capable of proving false statements about arithmetic, including its own consistency. The implications of Gödel's incomplete list theorems are profound and far-reaching. They demonstrate that there are inherent limitations to the power of formal systems and the extent to which they can capture mathematical truth. Additionally, the theorems have implications for the philosophy of mathematics, raising questions about the nature of mathematical truth, the role of formal proof, and the foundations of mathematical knowledge. Gödel's work on incomplete lists have had a significant impact beyond mathematics, influencing fields such as computer science, philosophy, and cognitive science. The theorems have inspired further research into the nature of computation, the limits of formal systems, and the relationship between mathematics and human cognition. Boltzmann brain. The Boltzmann brain is a hypothetical concept in physics and cosmology, named after the Austrian physicist Ludwig Boltzmann. It refers to the idea of spontaneously fluctuating brain or conscious entity that arises as a statistical fluctuation within a vast random system such as the universe. The concept of the Boltzmann brain arises from considerations of statistical mechanics in the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy, a measure of disorder or randomness, tends to increase over time in isolated systems. According to this law, it is statistically much more probable for small, temporary fluctuations to occur than for larger, more stable structures to spontaneously arise. In the context of cosmology, the Boltzmann brain scenario raises questions about the likelihood of conscious observers, such as human beings, arising through random fluctuations in the universe, and its very low possibility of that happening. Proponents of the scenario argue that in a universe with a finite lifespan and a high level of entropy, it may be more probable for a single, fleeting Boltzmann brain to arise than for complex, stable structures such as galaxies, stars, and planets to form through natural processes. The Boltzmann brain scenario leads to philosophical and scientific challenges regarding the nature of consciousness, the anthropic principle, and the fine-tuning of the universe for the existence of life. Critics of the scenario argue that it leads to absurd conclusions and undermines the scientific pursuit of understanding the origin and evolution of complex systems in the universe. Overall, though, the Boltzmann brain remains a thought-provoking and controversial concept in cosmology and philosophy of science. While it highlights the role of statistical fluctuations in the universe and raises important questions about the nature of consciousness and the origin of life, it also presents challenges to our understanding of the universe's complexity and the reliability of scientific reasoning. Tier 9. Nietzsche's eternal return. Nietzsche's concept of the eternal return or eternal recurrence is a profound and provocative idea in his philosophy. At its core, it proposes that everything that has happened, is happening, and will happen in the universe will recur infinitely in exactly the same way. Nietzsche presents the idea in his work Thus Spoke Zarathustra, through the character of Zarathustra, who introduces it as the greatest weight imaginable. The concept challenges traditional notions of time, fate, and existence, pushing individuals to confront the idea of living their lives as if they would have to relive them endlessly. Here's a deeper exploration of Nietzsche's eternal return. Nietzsche saw the eternal return as a thought experiment rather than a literal truth. He used it to provoke existential reflection and encourage individuals to live authentically and passionately. The notion that one's life will repeat eternally forces a reevaluation of one's choices and actions. If one were to relive every moment of their life, would they be content with the choices they've made? Would they embrace the suffering and challenges as integral parts of their existence? Moreover, The eternal return underscores Nietzsche's rejection of traditional religious and moral frameworks. In a universe governed by eternal recurrence, there is no divine plan or ultimate redemption. Instead, individuals are solely responsible for creating meaning and value in their lives. This idea aligns with Nietzsche's emphasis on the will to power, and the individual's ability to assert their own values in a world devoid of inherent meaning. Existentialist philosophers, notably Martin Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre, found Nietzsche's concept of eternal return deeply resonant. For Heidegger, it exemplified the fundamental nature of human existence as thrownness into a world where one must confront the inevitability of death and the finitude of existence. Sartre, meanwhile, interpreted the eternal return as a call to embrace radical freedom and take responsibility for one's choices in the absence of predetermined moral guidelines. Although critics of Nietzsche's eternal return argued that it is a nihilistic and pessimistic doctrine, promoting a sense of despair and resignation in the face of an indifferent universe. Furthermore, the idea raises questions about personal identity and agency. If every moment of one's life will recur identically, do individuals have the capacity to change or transcend their circumstances? Despite its provocative nature, Nietzsche's concept of eternal return continues to captivate philosophers and thinkers across disciplines. It challenges us to confront the temporality of our existence, to live authentically in the face of uncertainty, and to cultivate meaning in a world where meaning is not inherent but constructed through human endeavor. In embracing the eternal return, one confronts the abyss of existence and finds within it the potential for self-overcoming and creative affirmation. Gödel's ontological proof. Kurt Gödel, known primarily for his incompleteness theorems and mathematical logic, also formulated an ontological proof for the existence of God. Unlike traditional arguments for God's existence, such as those put forth by Thomas Aquinas or René Descartes, Gödel's proof is deeply rooted in model logic and set theory. Let's get into Gödel's ontological proof. Gödel's proof is based on model logic, which deals with the logic of necessity and possibility. He begins by defining a property as positive if it is necessarily exemplified, i.e., it exists in all possible worlds. Then, Gödel defines God as being possessing all positive properties. This definition is crucial because it implies that God's existence is necessary, as God possesses all positive properties in all positive worlds. The crux of Gödel's argument lies in his use of meta logic and the concept of necessary existence. In model logic, something exists necessarily if it exists in all possible worlds. Gödel argues that if God possesses all positive properties, then by definition, God exists necessarily, as the property of necessary existence in itself positive. This leads to the conclusion that God exists in all possible worlds, including the actual world. Gödel's proof can be expressed formally using symbols and axioms from model logic, but its underlying intuition is that the concept of God as the most perfect being entails necessary existence. If a being possesses all positive properties, including necessary existence, then it must exist in all positive worlds, including the actual world. Critics of Gödel's ontological proof argue that it relies on controversial assumptions about the nature of existence and the validity of model logic. Some philosophers question whether necessary existence is a coherent concept or whether Gödel's definition of God as possessing all positive properties is sufficiently robust. Moreover, Gödel's proof has not gained widespread acceptance among philosophers and theologians. Unlike traditional arguments for God's existence, such as cosmological or teleological arguments, Gödel's proof is highly technical and esoteric, making it very difficult to assess its validity and implications, and just hard to understand in general. Despite its controversial nature, Gödel's ontological proof remains a fascinating and challenging contribution to the philosophy of religion and model logic. It raises profound questions about the nature of existence, necessity, and the concept of God as the most perfect being. Whether one finds Gödel's proof convincing or not, it undeniably stimulates philosophical inquiry and invites further exploration into the nature of reality and divinity. Tier 10. Identity death. The concept of identity death touches on profound existential questions about the nature of selfhood, personal identity, and mortality. It explores what happens to our sense of self and identity after death, and whether our identity can persist beyond the cessation of biological life. So what happens to ourselves once we die? Not just our body, but what happens to what makes us us? While the idea of identity death can be approached from various philosophical perspectives, let's explore it through the lens of existentialism and personal identity theory. From an existentialist perspective, identity death is intertwined with the fundamental human condition of confronting our morality and the inevitability of our eventual demise. Existentialist philosophers such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Heidegger argue that our identity is not fixed or predetermined, but is continually shaped through our choices, actions, and interactions with the world. However, death represents the ultimate limit to our existence, making the cessation of all possibilities and the end of our capacity to define ourselves. In this sense, identity death signifies the annihilation of our subjective experience and the dissolution of our consciousness into nothingness. Existentialist thinkers also grapple with the idea of authenticity in the face of death. They argue that individuals can confront the reality of their mortality and embrace their finitude by living authentically, fully engaging with life, and taking responsibility for their choices. By acknowledging the inevitability of death, one can affirm the significance of existence and can find meaning in the fleeting moments of life. In the realm of personal identity theory, identity death raises questions about the continuity of the self and the persistence of identity over time. Philosophers such as John Locke and Derek Parfit have explored the concept of personal identity and its relation to psychological continuity and physical continuity. According to Locke, personal identity consists of the continuity of consciousness and memory, such that as long as one can remember past experiences, they maintain the same identity. Parfit, on the other hand, challenges the notion of a persistent self, suggesting that identity is a matter of psychological connectedness rather than numerical identity. In the context of identity death, personal identity theory raises questions about whether our identity can survive beyond the point of biological death. If identity is contingent upon consciousness and memory, what happens to our sense of self when consciousness ceases to exist? Can identity persist through the memories and experiences of others, or does it inevitably dissolve with the death of the individual? Ultimately, the concept of identity death prompts us to reflect on the nature of selfhood, the significance of mortality, and the boundaries of human existence. Whether approached from an existentialist perspective or through personal identity theory, identity death invites us to confront the mystery of our own finitude and contemplate the legacy we leave behind in the face of oblivion. And wow, that wraps up the ultimate philosophy Iceberg explained. We are almost 3 hours into this. That's a long iceberg. Definitely covered almost all the philosophy necessary. If you watched all the way to the end, now you're basically like, you're a genius at philosophy. You'll be able to school anybody with that. I mean, I learned so much making this iceberg and scripting it. Like, oh my God, so much research, so much just everything into this. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I've always wanted to make a really long philosophy video. I made one in the past, but I wasn't happy with it. So I really wanted to revisit it with better editing, better microphone, better script. And I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you're still watching almost 3 hours into this, consider subscribing or comment something down below. What's something you guys could comment? I don't know. Comment like philosophy's cool or something down below. If you made it all the way to the end, almost 3 hour mark. And yeah, subscribe and like the video. I mean, yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you'd like to see more long videos or short videos or both videos in the future. I'm not sure what usually you guys like. Is like 30-minute a good time, an hour 30, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour long iceberg? Let me know. Comment that down below. And yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking to the end. And until next time, see ya.